Hey, I need to talk to you about something important. Come here for a minute. I was called by the second generation president, Mr. Turner, and headed to his office. It was probably about my contract, which had expired. Since your contract is up, we're done here. Pack up your stuff and don't ever contact me again, alright? There were many things we needed to discuss, like the systems used in the company or my severance pay. But Mr. Turner just smirked as he showed me the contract. I was shocked to find that the severance pay clause had been removed from the contract. What? What is this? You didn't even bother to check the contract, thinking it was the same as before, right? That's on you. What? It's true I had signed the contract extending it until the end of the year, and that was after he became the new president. Since the contract looked almost identical to the previous ones, I hadn't read through every line. I never imagined they would remove the severance pay clause. What is going on here? Why would I waste money on severance for someone like you? If you had any brains, you'd have figured that out by now. I felt anger boiling up from deep inside, and I struggled to keep my emotions in check. Sure, it's my fault for not reading the contract carefully. I had no intention of arguing about that. But what I couldn't forgive was how Mr. Turner was betraying everything the previous president stood for. Listen, someone like you is worth nothing. No severance after your contract ends. Good riddance. The moment I heard those words, I knew I was completely done with him. I headed straight to grab my laptop. My name is Kyle, and I currently work as a software engineer. It's been 10 years since I started in this industry right after graduating high school. Becoming an engineer wasn't an easy journey. Thank you for having me from today. Oh, you're Kyle, right? I've heard about you. Let's work well together. My parents divorced when I was in middle school, and I was raised by my single mother after that. Since my father had controlled all the finances, he took everything with him when he left. Life after the divorce was extremely hard. Even so, my mother worked tirelessly to support me, and I managed to graduate from middle school. In high school, I worked part-time jobs to cover my own tuition, doing everything I could to ease my mom's burden. But eventually, my mother fell ill and could no longer work. That's when I gave up on college and decided to get a job instead. Since you're a beginner, you need to learn the basics first. There's a lot to remember, like how to write efficient code. Work hard. And you'll get responsibilities soon. Yes, sir. Under the guidance of my senior, Mark, I gradually gained the knowledge and experience I needed as an engineer. But I was the only one in the company who didn't have a college degree. While everyone else joined as college graduates, I was just a high school grad working part-time. Even though we were aiming for the same goal, we were starting from very different places. Because of my position, I was never trusted with major tasks. Even though skill was part of the evaluation, my lack of a college degree was a huge obstacle. I had known ever since they told me to work towards becoming a full-time employee, but it was still tough to keep going. You can definitely do this. I know the company's trust is hard to feel, but I believe in you. Keep pushing. Yes. I'll keep at it. After that, I worked harder than ever to succeed as an engineer. Even when I got home, I studied online materials daily. After a year, I had more knowledge than the new college graduates. Let me introduce you. This is Timothy from the sales department. Nice to meet you. He and I go way back from college. We've been friends for a long time. Pleasure to meet you. I had been delivering solid results at the company, but my lack of a degree still held me back in many ways. In spite of that, Mark was the only one who really looked out for me, and he even introduced me to Timothy, a guy in sales. While that introduction didn't directly impact my work, the fact that Mark would vouch for me like that made me feel trusted. I was grateful for that. Thank you for today. Please invite me out again sometime. After that, Timothy grew fond of me too, and we became close enough that he'd take me out for drinks every now and then. As I grew as an engineer, I was eventually put in charge of a small project. I'm going to gain more experience and eventually become the leader of a major project. That was the current goal. One day after work, Timothy invited me out for drinks again. Thanks for coming out tonight. I'm probably going to get really busy soon, so I won't be able to go drinking for a while. Busy? Is there a new project coming up? Not exactly a new project. I'm going independent. I'm starting my own company. It's still a ways off, though. Timothy said this with a big smile, and I was completely shocked because I hadn't heard anything about it before. I knew he was good at his job. Despite his relatively young age, he had a decent position and lived quite comfortably. It means he was probably making good money. But he never showed me any indication that he'd go independent. You're going independent. Yeah. I owe a lot to this company for nurturing me and treating me well, so I didn't want to leave on bad terms. That's why I've been talking with them carefully to ensure a smooth departure. I see. That's incredible. I've never thought about going independent, so I'm both surprised and impressed. Timothy wasn't just thinking about himself, he was also considering the company that had supported him. Sure, that might be expected of any professional. But seeing how he handled everything with care and avoided creating conflict around him was probably the secret to his success. After that, Timothy shared more details about his plans. He wanted to use the connections he'd built to launch an online retail business. That sounds amazing. Best of luck to you. But I've still got a long way to go. There's so much I need to do before I'm ready. I'm planning to work on it alone for the first year after I leave the company, as it's going to take that long to prepare. Couldn't you set things up to run smoothly and then leave the company later? The work I'm in charge of right now isn't something I can juggle with running a business on the side. Plus, it wouldn't be respectful to the company. It was his sincerity that made him so respected and liked by everyone around him. That's what I genuinely felt. We celebrated that night with a big party and had a blast. But after hearing Timothy's story, I too started seriously thinking about going independent. I'd already been wanting to put myself in an environment where I could rely solely on my own skills, and Timothy's story inspired me further. I knew I still had a ways to go before being fully recognized as an engineer. But the desire to test my abilities had been ignited. I can handle projects on my own that are at the same level as the ones I'm working on now. I plan to take on freelance work, build up my portfolio, and eventually establish my own software development company. After consulting with Mark and my superiors, I decided to leave the company at the end of the month. It was a bold move, and I didn't have a solid plan in place. But I felt ready to give it my all. 1 year later, I received an offer from Timothy to work with him. It was an exciting offer, but I found myself in a difficult position. The truth was, I had just successfully gone freelance and started my own company. While it was a wonderful opportunity, I couldn't just go work for someone else now. Thank you for the kind offer. But actually, I just founded my own company. It's still just me, but it's a software development firm. Wow, really? That's incredible. Congratulations. Timothy's reaction was enthusiastic, but I knew it probably wasn't the answer he had been hoping for. He probably expected me to eagerly accept his offer to work at his company, but instead, he was genuinely happy for me. Well then, I guess I should just have your company subcontract the work. It's a software development business, right? Ha! I need you to build our system. Can I count on you? I was originally hoping you'd work as our in-house engineer. But since you're running your own company, we can subcontract you instead. Before I officially founded my company, I had gotten some freelance gigs, but this was by far the biggest project I'd ever been offered. Developing a web application for an e-commerce company. I would be responsible for building everything from the ground up. Even though my company didn't have much of a track record yet, Timothy trusted me. I was determined to give it my all to meet these expectations. I truly felt that from the bottom of my heart. Our relationship continued after that, and I worked on building and maintaining systems, as well as training his engineering team. In what seemed like the blink of an eye, 30 years passed, and Timothy retired as he grew older. The new president was Mr. Turner, who had been serving as the vice president for a few years. Hey, got a minute? Yes? You're on contract, right? Once I take over, I'm planning to cut all the contract employees. So, you might want to start looking for another job. I was suddenly called in and told this. By now, my own company had grown quite a bit, so I could manage even without the work from Timothy's company. Ideally, I'd focus entirely on my business, but I continued working there as an external contractor because of my relationship with Timothy. So, while returning to my own company full-time wouldn't be an issue, the abruptness of the conversation took me by surprise. What do you mean by this? It's pretty sudden. I mean, I don't have money to waste on someone like you. We don't need useless people just playing around on their computers. Mr. Turner said this to my face, without hesitation. I wasn't sure whether it was a cost-cutting move or if he just personally disliked me. But ever since he became vice president, it was clear that he only cared about people's academic backgrounds. He judged everyone's work performance based solely on their educational qualifications. Does this have something to do with the fact that I didn't graduate from college? Wow, you figured it out. Even with a high school diploma, you could grasp that much, huh? I sighed, confirming what I had already suspected. There are people with all kinds of educational backgrounds at this company. Some graduated from lower-ranked universities, some from vocational schools, and others like me only have a high school diploma. There were even a few who were middle school graduates. Timothy had always hired people without regard for their education. In today's world, it's possible to acquire various skills on your own. A college degree doesn't determine a person's worth. But Mr. Turner didn't understand that, and he revered higher education. It probably had something to do with his own academic achievements, but I couldn't help but sigh again. Are you firing me right now? No, I'm not that heartless. I'll extend your contract until the end of the year. Okay. After that, make sure you found yourself another job. Was this his way of being kind? Still, I had given 30 years to this company. Timothy always put the company's growth first, so its scale was much larger than mine. But I had supported the business while managing my own company. It might sound arrogant, but I had done it for Timothy, providing my time and expertise because of everything he had done for me. And now, without knowing any of that, Mr. Turner was coldly cutting me loose. I let out a heavy sigh, realizing that complaining wouldn't change anything, and decided to do my best until my contract ended. However, hey, why don't you go clean the bathroom or something? What? Bathroom cleaning? That's about all someone as useless as you can do, right? It's an order from the president, so get to it. Not just me, but all the employees who were on the chopping block were subjected to harassment from Mr. Turner. Forced to do tasks outside of our job scope like cleaning the bathrooms, excessive nitpicking on our work, and constant lectures. It was endless. Even in that environment, I continued to do the work I was given. Sure, I could have quit right away, but I didn't want to cause trouble for the other employees or the company. Thank you for your help today. Not at all. Feel free to reach out if you have any more questions. Will do. I kept working until the end of the year, and finally, my last day came. Hey! I need to talk to you about something. Come here for a minute. I was called in by Mr. Turner and headed to his office. It was probably about the expiration of my contract. Your contract is up, so we're done here. Pack up your stuff and don't ever contact me again. His high-handed attitude left me completely stunned. What on earth was Mr. Turner thinking? There were still things we needed to discuss, like severance pay and the system I worked on. It couldn't just end with, goodbye. What are you talking about? We need to discuss severance and the system. You're not getting a single cent of severance. You useless fool, stop trying to leech off this company's resources. I wasn't asking for anything unreasonable. Timothy had promised me that I would receive severance pay equivalent to that of a regular employee. It should have been clearly stated in the contract. I wasn't in need of the money, but it was a gesture of appreciation from Timothy. It should be in the contract. The part about severance pay. Are you talking about this contract? With a smirk, Mr. Turner pulled out my contract. It looked like the same one I'd always signed. If you're really getting severance, show me where it says that. He spoke confidently. I took the contract from him and searched for the clause. It had always been written at the very end, so I immediately flipped to the last page, but there was no mention of severance pay. I checked the other pages as well, but it was nowhere to be found. I even pulled up the copy I had saved as a PDF on my phone. To my shock, the severance clause wasn't in my copy either. This meant that Mr. Turner hadn't forged the document. What is going on? You thought it was the same as before and didn't bother to check, huh? That's on you. What? It's true I had signed the contract extending it until the end of the year, and that was after he became the new president. Since it looked almost identical to the previous contracts, I hadn't read through every line. I never imagined they would have removed the severance clause. What is the meaning of this? You really think we'd waste money on severance for someone like you? If you had any brains, you'd have figured that out by now. Anger surged from the depths of my gut, and I had to fight to keep my emotions in check. Yes, it was my fault for not reading the entire contract. I wasn't going to argue about that. But what I couldn't forgive was how Mr. Turner so easily betrayed the principles that Timothy had stood for. Listen, someone like you is worth nothing. No severance after your contract ends. Good riddance. At that moment, I completely lost my temper. I never imagined he was this self-serving, but it showed me exactly the kind of president he was. Understood. Thank you for everything up until now. I said that much, bowed, and returned to my desk. Of course, I wasn't going to let this slide. People who don't act fairly deserve the same treatment in return. I packed my things, said my goodbyes to my colleagues, and left the company. Once I got home, I opened my laptop and got to work on something. The next day, I got a call from Mr. Turner. "Hey, what the hell is going on? What do you mean? Calling me so early in the morning and yelling like that? Where are your manners? You disabled all the systems we use." That's what's going on. I'd never heard him scream like that before. But I wasn't surprised. I didn't expect him to contact me so soon, but I knew this was coming. Of course, I did. "You didn't renew my contract." "Huh? Contract? Wow, you really don't know anything, do you? And you're the president?" I couldn't help but smirk as I said that. Mr. Turner, with his inflated pride, was now screaming at me even louder because of my attitude. "Do you even know what I'm doing? I don't know what you're talking about. You were always just messing around on the computer. So why would you have the authority to disable the system? Nobody else knew about this. How could this be happening?" Clearly, Mr. Turner had no idea what I'd been doing for the company. He must have been told everything when he took over from Timothy. Either he completely forgot, or he just brushed it off without paying attention. Either way, now he was panicking because the company's system was down. The systems affected included employee management tools and accounting software. We have tons of remote workers, and we've got a pile of invoices coming in at the end of the month. This is going to be a disaster. Say something. As the CEO of the company that developed the system, I'm willing to renegotiate the contract. We could even switch to a buyout model instead of a usage fee like before. But, of course, you'll have to apologize on your knees first." "What?" I said it clearly. I knew this wasn't going to end without consequences. I had already informed the management and accounting teams, but if this got back to Timothy, my reputation could take a hit. Not renewing the contract and restricting access to the system was perfectly within my rights. But I couldn't help wondering if Timothy would be disappointed in me. That thought lingered. Still, I couldn't forgive what Mr. Turner had done. "You've gone too far. I'm coming over right now, so get to the office." I didn't intend to keep the system offline forever, so I headed to the company later that afternoon. "Hey, I've been waiting for you. Let's head to the president's office." To my surprise, it was Timothy waiting for me in the lobby. He must have heard about the situation and rushed over to the company. I had my reasons, but I wasn't sure how much Timothy knew or what he was thinking. We both stayed silent as we made our way to the president's office. "Excuse me." Timothy knocked and entered the president's office, where Mr. Turner stood, rigid and imposing. "I sincerely apologize. I deeply regret the disrespectful way you were treated, and I'd like to ask for your forgiveness." To my astonishment, Timothy was the one apologizing to me. Wait a second. What's going on? Why is Timothy apologizing? Mr. Turner was desperate to stop him from bowing his head. It was clear that Mr. Turner had thought Timothy would be on his side, angry with me, and backing him up. However, the reality was quite the opposite. "Timothy, please, lift your head. You. Stop acting like that. You should be apologizing with him. What kind of nonsense are you spouting?" In all my 40 years of knowing Timothy, I had never seen him this angry. The intensity of his fury left Mr. Turner visibly shaken. The atmosphere in the room instantly became tense. "Don't make me angrier than I already am. Who do you think is responsible for this mess?" "Well, you see." Trying to force things through with an authoritarian attitude without taking responsibility for your actions. I never thought you were this kind of person. If I had known, I never would have appointed you as president. But before anything else, you need to apologize." Timothy spoke in a low, menacing tone, and Mr. Turner, visibly deflated, turned to me and bowed his head. "What is it?" "First of all, I'm sorry about the contract." Mr. Turner mumbled an apology for his actions. Perhaps he thought I was upset about not receiving the severance, but at that moment, I was more curious about Timothy's reaction. How was Timothy going to handle this? "So, how do you plan to take responsibility for your actions? You're not a child, and certainly not an ordinary employee. You've caused damage to this company. How do you intend to make amends?" Timothy had completely locked his sights on Mr. Turner, who had gone pale. He was likely searching for the right answer, but nothing seemed to come to mind. That made sense because he'd always operated with a self-centered mindset, crushing anything he didn't like with force. It was hard to imagine someone like him offering the sincerity Timothy was expecting. "We could renegotiate a new contract. I'll be sure to offer a higher fee, and the usage cost will be more than before." "That's not what I'm talking about." Timothy's voice echoed throughout the president's office, and Mr. Turner's face contorted in fear. He had clearly stepped on a landmine and realized too late what a mistake he'd made. Timothy was truly furious now. "If you don't understand the gravity of your actions, let me make it clear. You're fired. I'm not leaving you in charge of this company any longer." "What? You've got to be joking, right? Do you think this is the time for jokes? If you honestly believe that, your head must be in the clouds. I heard you look down on those who are high school graduates, but it seems your brain is smaller than a microbe's." Timothy's sharp words left Mr. Turner completely speechless. Even I hadn't expected the word fire to come out of Timothy's mouth. But it was proof of just how serious Timothy was about this. "What you did is utterly unforgivable. You used your position as president to wield your power, not for the company's benefit, but to satisfy your own selfish desires. Someone like that has no business running a company." "Please, wait. Can't you reconsider? You can't just fire me like this. I admit what I did was a grave mistake, but you understand it, don't you? What you did is unforgivable, and I have no intention of forgiving you. Take responsibility and leave this company." As Timothy said this, Mr. Turner collapsed to his knees. Despite his usual domineering attitude, he began sobbing loudly and prostrating himself before Timothy. "Please, I beg you. Can't you forgive me? Do you think crying and begging for forgiveness will make everything right? Take responsibility for your actions like a man." Even though Mr. Turner continued to apologize and plead, Timothy didn't budge. After that, Timothy led me out of the president's office and into a nearby meeting room. "I'm truly sorry about everything that happened. I was the one who made him president, so this is partly my responsibility as well. I never imagined he would turn out to be like this. I'm really sorry." Timothy had already apologized to me when we entered the president's office, and I never blamed him for any of this. There was no need for an apology, but this was Timothy's way of showing sincerity. "You don't need to apologize, Timothy. You're not at fault here. You've helped me more than you know. Without you, this company wouldn't be what it is today. It was unforgivable to treat someone like you, an indispensable part of the company, with such disrespect." Timothy spoke with tears welling up in his eyes as he expressed his gratitude to me. You built our system for a fraction of the market price, and you let us use it for less than 1/10 of the usual cost. When the company grew, you dedicated your time to training our engineering team. You even helped with the programming classes we started recently. For 30 years, this company thrived because you were there. Timothy. Even during tough times for the business, or when I was dealing with personal issues, you were always there to support me. It's because of your presence that we've come this far. Thank you, truly. Timothy grasped my hand firmly, looking me in the eye as he spoke. Seeing him like that brought tears to my eyes as well. But I owed so much to Timothy too. You taught me how to run a business and introduced me to clients. I'm just as indebted to you. I don't think I could ever repay all you've done for me. Hearing this, Timothy smiled and replied, "Hearing that makes everything I've done feel worthwhile. Thank you, truly. And I'm sorry again for everything that happened. I know I'm in no position to ask, but could we continue working together?" Though Timothy seemed apologetic, I already had my answer. Of course. I'm looking forward to working with you again. We shook hands firmly, reaffirming our partnership. In the end, Mr. Turner was fired and forced out of the company. Timothy's company was large, and word about Mr. Turner spread quickly, both inside and outside the industry. It seemed he couldn't find a new job. Having lost his job, he was abandoned by his family, and now lives alone in obscurity. Most of the salary he had earned over the years had been squandered, and whatever little savings he had left were taken by his ex-wife for child support. It was a fitting end for someone who had caused so much harm, but it was clear he was living a miserable life. As for me, I've been focusing on running my own company while maintaining my strong friendship with Timothy. Timothy has returned to his role as president and is now dedicated to mentoring the next company leader. We've brought in some great talent. They're interested in the president position, so I'm taking my time to develop them, he told me. That's wonderful. I'd love to learn more from you again. I, too, have been thinking that it might soon be time to pass my company on to someone else. I'll need to learn those skills from Timothy when the time comes. Meeting Timothy was one of the most significant events of my life. Of course, I can't say that everything in life has been easy. There have been struggles, challenges, and moments where I felt cornered emotionally. But every time, I would look to Timothy and think, I want to work as hard as he does. And Timothy, in turn, felt the same way about me. Life is unpredictable, and we often don't realize how much we are helping others. That's why I believe it's important to have confidence in what we're doing now. When you join hands with those who cherish you and, in turn, cherish them as well. If you live wholeheartedly, focusing on what's in front of you, a better tomorrow and future will surely await. I've taken this lesson to heart, and I plan to live my life by it moving forward. During an in-house competition, the new employee I was mentoring froze on stage. The presentation was delayed, and everyone in the room looked concerned. The data in the materials is. The data? Indeed, the numbers in the presentation were completely different from what I remembered. Hey, what's going on? Are you not prepared? One of the training staff couldn't hold back and spoke up. The rest of the employees began murmuring amongst themselves. Hey, there's only 5 minutes left. How could you make such a basic mistake with the data? You can't keep acting like you're still in school. Shouted at in a loud voice, she looked down, desperately trying to hold back her tears. I couldn't let this go on any longer. I stood up. Wait a minute. 5 minutes is plenty of time. I grabbed the laptop containing the original data and headed to the stage. Leave it to me. What happened next would turn out to be a pivotal moment for both me and the new employee. My name is Travis. I've been working at a printing company for about 7 years now, ever since I joined as a new graduate. My main job is to confirm printing orders and pass them on to the printing department. It's mostly routine work, and while there's a lot of it, it's fairly straightforward. I don't make any big mistakes, but I also don't have any notable achievements. In the company, I'm an unremarkable figure, neither excelling nor failing. It's almost impossible to stand out in a job that revolves around simple tasks. If I wanted to aim higher, I could request a transfer to the sales or development department during the biannual reviews, but I've stayed in the same department I was first assigned to, maintaining the status quo. Travis has been here a long time, right? Doesn't he ever get bored doing the same job? Theodore, our colleague from the same year, is already a manager, you know? Well, Theodore has been in the spotlight since he was a rookie. I mean, he graduated from Tokyo University, right? He's exactly the kind of elite this company wants. And where did Travis go to school again? I heard he didn't go to college. He graduated from an online high school. Oh, well, that explains a lot. I overheard this conversation from inside the women's restroom. What exactly does it explain? That I don't have ambitions because I went to an online high school? That I don't get bored doing the same job because of my educational background? I believe academic credentials have nothing to do with the quality of one's work, but I'm not skilled enough to say that with confidence. I'm okay with the way things are, and it's true I graduated from an online high school. But I don't remember doing anything bad enough to deserve being talked about like that, though, maybe in the eyes of my coworkers. My lack of contribution to the company is seen as a bad thing. But that's fine. Even if I went above and beyond in my work, nothing good would come of it. I pretended not to hear and walked past the restroom. The new fiscal year began, and a new group of employees joined the company. Among them was a strikingly beautiful woman. Her name was Rachel. With a smile as bright as a blooming flower, I figured she'd become popular in no time. But my prediction turned out to be completely wrong. During the months of training, I had a chance to work with her, and even with the simplest tasks I was doing, she took much longer than expected. She was thorough with her work, but that thoroughness cost her too much time. Under pressure from deadlines, she made mistakes over and over again. In short, she was inefficient. Even sorting tasks that came through the system or email was a challenge for her, and she quickly found herself isolated from the others. While the other new hires were efficiently handling both simple and advanced tasks, already proving useful as assistants to their senior colleagues, Rachel was still struggling with basic administrative work. Rachel was clearly being given the cold shoulder by her peers. I even overheard someone complaining, "Why is a girl like her at this company?" My friend didn't even get hired. While the other new employees left promptly at closing time for a group drink, Rachel stayed glued to her computer. When I asked if she wasn't joining them, she said they told her to come when she finished her work. By the time she stopped working, it was already 9 p.m. The gathering had surely ended by then. I couldn't help but think that the company atmosphere contributed to why this wasn't being called outright bullying. In meetings, our manager Theodore would say things like, "If you know you're not capable, you have to work harder than anyone else. If you can't contribute to the company, you're just a useless salary thief." Rachel's position in the company was becoming more and more uncomfortable. Putting this kind of pressure on someone who's still a rookie won't accomplish anything. Rather than motivating her to work harder, it would only sap her energy. I suspected Theodore's real goal wasn't to encourage Rachel, but to send a warning to the others: if you don't perform, you'll be treated like this too. At the same time, he was hyping up the other new employees, telling them, "You guys are doing great. Keep aiming for a quick promotion." I couldn't understand why she was being treated so harshly, especially as someone still in her first year. During lunch break, I invited her to join me for a meal. Since Rachel was temporarily assigned to my department for training, it didn't seem out of place, and I was relieved no one found it suspicious. "You look tired. Are you okay?" I asked, even though I knew she wasn't. It turned out her situation was more serious than I thought. "I never realized I was such a failure." Her voice trembled, as if she were about to cry, and I panicked. I hadn't expected her to be this distressed. Everyone in my cohort graduated from top universities, and I'm the only one who went to a third-rate school. I already felt that gap. But now that we're working, the difference is even more obvious. Everyone's making progress, while I just keep messing up. "You must be disappointed in me too, Travis." Her words were full of sincerity. At the same time, I wondered if she was judging herself too harshly. "Rachel, are you holding yourself back because of your educational background?" "What? People, at least in the real world, don't judge you by your academic background or your grades. They judge you on your skills and motivation. Your peers might have impressive academic records and be good with numbers or languages, but that's because they worked hard. Even now, they're studying and learning about the company. None of them are slacking off, right? Yeah. They're getting results because they're putting in the effort. I know you're working hard too, but maybe you've drawn a line in the sand. Telling yourself you're no good just because you went to a less prestigious school. You're right. I've always thought they were smarter than me and could do things I couldn't. I figured, what's the point? I'm never going to be as good as them anyway. Then, first, you need to have confidence in yourself. You're incredibly thorough. Whether it's reports, cleaning, or organizing data, everything you do is done with care. That's a great quality, but maybe you could find a better balance between quality and speed. Even if you cut a few corners, with your level of work, no one's going to complain." As I rambled on, I remembered how low my own evaluations were from my coworkers. Who am I to give advice, really? Well, I mean, that's just my opinion, for what it's worth. I hope it helps a little. To my surprise, Rachel's eyes sparkled as she looked at me. "No, Travis, your advice was really helpful." I was so fixated on doing everything perfectly, no matter what. I realize now that balance is key. It seemed like something had clicked for her. From that point on, Rachel transformed. Her work efficiency improved dramatically. She started to ask questions about how to handle client interactions smoothly and how to organize documents, absorbing new information and turning it into valuable experience. She wasn't slacking off because of her academic background. She simply didn't know the right direction to focus her efforts. Even her peers seemed to have a slight change of heart, starting to ask her for help or relying on her for certain tasks. From my perspective, it looked like she was gradually building smoother relationships with her colleagues. About a month later, Rachel invited me to lunch. "Thanks to you, I've been able to connect with my peers and even get praised by the senior staff." As she bowed her head, thanking me, I smiled and replied, "That's great to hear. I didn't do anything special. You're the one who worked hard." No, if it weren't for your advice, I'd still be stuck. You reached out and showed concern when I needed it most. You really saved me. It felt a bit over the top, but I was genuinely happy that I could be the one to give her that push. I'm just glad it helped. Keep up the good work. I'll be rooting for you. Thank you. Also, Rachel placed a few documents on the table after finishing her meal. It was the announcement for the in-house competition. Twice a year, employees can submit proposals in any genre, on any topic, giving everyone a chance to participate. For new employees, this competition is one of their key assignments, and the results of their performance often determine their official department assignment. It's essentially a stage for them to showcase the culmination of their training. Would you be willing to join me? Me? Yes. The guidelines say that participation doesn't have to be solo. Of course, I'll handle the proposal and presentation, since it's part of my training. But I would love to get your advice. I'm not sure I'd be much help. I think there are other, more dependable seniors from different departments you could ask. So, are you saying you don't want to participate? Oh no, it's not that. I'm just saying it for your sake. This is your chance to show off all your hard work, and I don't want to interfere. It's thanks to your advice that I've changed so much. Please don't put yourself down. Put myself down, huh? Rachel used to say, I'm not good enough, too. And now, I realize I'm doing the same thing she once did. After lecturing her on not giving up, here I am, hesitating when it's my turn. That's pretty convenient of me, isn't it? As I was mulling it over, a voice interrupted from above. Well, isn't this an interesting pair? It was Theodore. We ran into each other often in the employee cafeteria. But today, he looked at us with a smug grin. Then again, maybe it's not that surprising. You two losers are a perfect match. His words made me bristle. I'd been ridiculed by him countless times, so it's nothing new. But dragging Rachel into it was a different story. It's fine if you insult me, but saying that about Rachel as her superior isn't appropriate. You should think twice before demotivating a new employee like that. You're in management, after all. The words I'd been holding back for so long finally spilled out, and Theodore's face immediately twisted in anger. What? A nobody like you, talking back to me? What gives you the right? If someone's useless, I'll call them useless. It's the truth, isn't it? I'm just saying, you could find a better way to say it. You don't even try to see how hard she's working. Shut up. You, of all people, don't get to lecture me. His outburst silenced the entire cafeteria, and all eyes turned toward us. Realizing he was the center of attention, Theodore clicked his tongue and stormed off. As the noise of the cafeteria gradually returned, Rachel bowed her head to me. Thank you for standing up for me. Don't worry about it. I just said what I thought. You keep doing your best, just like always. I will. But why is Theodore so harsh? I don't mean that being strict is wrong, but Rachel struggled to find the right words. I could tell she wanted to say something about Theodore's bias against people with less prestigious academic backgrounds or those he deemed unworthy. Well, I guess it's true I'm not the most capable person. From his point of view, I must be full of flaws, so I'm probably just a nuisance to him. That's not true. You've been the one looking out for me the most since I joined. You don't have any flaws in my eyes. Thank you, Rachel. You're kind. It makes me so mad. I hate hearing people talk about you like that. She clenched the documents in her hand tightly. Please. Let's enter the competition together. I want to prove them wrong, the ones calling us useless. I was taken aback by her determination. With such a passionate junior looking to me for support, I couldn't just brush her off. All right, I'll help you as much as I can. Let's give it our best shot. Yes. Thank you so much. From that moment, I worked alongside Rachel, supporting her as we prepared for the competition together. The task that new employees are expected to present in the competition is the development of a new project proposal. I gathered the results of past competitions, along with successful projects and products, and handed them over to Rachel. She meticulously reviewed them to see if her own ideas would be a good fit for the company. I may not have much ambition or any standout skills, but I do have experience. I supervised the material she prepared, offered corrections and advice, and even helped her practice for the presentation. Other new employees were also working hard with the support of their respective mentors. Of course, regular employees, myself included, were also preparing for the competition while managing our daily tasks. Rachel frequently stayed late into the night, exhausted but never complaining or showing signs of weakness. She was determined, focusing all her energy on the competition. Seeing her dedication, I did everything I could to support her. But there was always someone ready to undermine our efforts. It was Theodore. No matter how hard you try, the result will be a disaster. As we were in the middle of our meeting, Theodore approached us. He was already wearing a smug, victorious grin as he looked down on us. I'm participating in the competition as well. It's a shame you two have to compete against my proposal. No matter how much effort you put in, you'll never even come close to mine. Before Rachel could respond, I stepped forward. The judges, not you, will decide the outcome. Insulting us won't get you anywhere. What? Do you even realize your situation? A loser with a low education level and a graduate from a third-rate university are foolish enough to compete against me. You'd be better off withdrawing. We're not withdrawing. This is Rachel's assignment, after all. And if anything, your attitude has only fueled our motivation. Right, Rachel? With a smile, she nodded enthusiastically. Theodore's taunts didn't affect us. We knew how hard we were working and how good our proposal was. We had no reason to care about the sneers from someone who had no idea what we were doing. Pathetic losers who don't know when to quit. You'll regret it later, acting all tough now. Theodore muttered under his breath as he walked out into the hallway. I hope that's the last we hear from him. Travis, thank you again. I'll work even harder to make sure we beat Theodore. That's the spirit. In reality, I wasn't sure if we could beat someone as intelligent and experienced as Theodore, especially given his position as a department head. But the result wasn't what mattered most to Rachel. Learning how to develop a proposal, present it effectively, and be inspired by others. These experiences will help her grow and contribute to her future success. And when that happens, it will be her true victory. Oh, by the way, Rachel, about this calculation here. Pushing thoughts of Theodore aside, I resumed our meeting. Finally, the day of the competition arrived. It was held in the large conference room from the early morning. Rachel was the last of the new employees to present. Each participant had 10 minutes, and everyone's presentations were impressive, showcasing their hard work and preparation. Though Rachel was visibly nervous, I was confident that after all the practice, she would be fine. Her name was called, and she walked up to the stage, albeit a bit awkwardly, while I sat at the laptop below, ready to control the slides. My role was to change the visuals on the screen in sync with her presentation. As she raised the final set of printed materials we had prepared just the night before, her eyes widened in shock. She started flipping through the pages rapidly, as if she was seeing them for the first time. The presentation still hadn't started, and the employees were beginning to look concerned. "Rachel, what's wrong?" I whispered quietly. She snapped out of her daze and glanced at me. "The data in the materials is..." "The data?" I quickly opened the document in front of me and scanned through it as well. As I scanned through the documents, the sales figures and forecast numbers were completely different from what I remembered. "What is this?" Just to be sure, I checked the presentation materials that were meant to be projected on the screen. The numbers were off there too. Had we failed to save the data correctly? Was it a mistaken input, or maybe a system error? No, now wasn't the time to figure out why. I quickly opened my own folder. While we didn't have the finalized presentation data, I still had the raw data files where the original calculations had been made. It wasn't the presentation version, but the foundational data was there. However, it was just a long list of numbers in groups, unprocessed and without any proper formatting. Columns of 6-digit numbers, grouped in various ways, filled the screen. "What's going on? Are you not ready?" The training supervisor couldn't stay silent any longer and called out to Rachel. Other employees began murmuring as well. The data, it's wrong." "The data? Didn't you check it beforehand?" "No." "Do you have a backup?" "No." "I don't," Rachel answered honestly, and a collective sigh rippled through the room. Based on what they just heard, it was easy to assume she hadn't prepared properly. It might seem like an unbelievable mistake, but this is exactly when a mentor or supervisor should step in with advice, saying something like, "Make sure to be prepared next time." I couldn't understand why everyone was acting so exasperated. Then again, I was partly to blame for not checking things myself. Instead of focusing on my own tasks right before the presentation, I should have been there to help her. So now, it's on me to fix this. There are only 5 minutes left. How could you make such a basic mistake? You can't keep acting like you're still in school. Theodore's harsh voice echoed through the room, causing Rachel to shrink in fear. This is a waste of time. Just stop already. With that, everyone started flipping to the next presentation in their materials. Rachel, now completely dejected, was holding back tears. This couldn't be how things ended. I stood up. "Wait. 5 minutes is more than enough," I announced. I grabbed the laptop containing the original data and stood next to Rachel. Then, I pulled a whiteboard from the side of the room. "Leave it to me. Let's present together. I'll calculate the data and explain it as we go." Everyone, we apologize for the delay. Due to some data issues, we'll be presenting using this whiteboard. I gave Rachel a reassuring look, and she nodded, quickly picking out the key points she needed to cover within the remaining time. Meanwhile, I glanced at the numbers on the screen. These weren't simple addition or subtraction calculations. There was no time to enter formulas into Excel. Mental math would be faster. As soon as we got to the data portion, I stepped in and began writing numbers on the whiteboard. Here's the sales through last year, the expected projections, and the satisfaction rates for our orders. I quickly summarized the key numbers, calculating in my head and jotting them down on the board. My handwriting wasn't the best, but I hoped they'd overlook that. As Rachel mentioned earlier, we considered the requests to increase the types of printing paper. After comparing the prices of 30 different types and analyzing the difference in sales revenue, we found that, hey, is Travis doing mental math right now? No way. Calculating those numbers instantly is impossible, right? But he's looking at the screen and writing down the numbers as he goes. I could hear the murmurs around me, but I was calm. These calculations were simple for me. And that's the basis of our data. Rachel, I'll leave the closing to you. Yes. I see great potential in this project, and it's something that can be accomplished with everyone's combined efforts. For example, Samuel, who is skilled in languages and holds certifications, could contribute greatly to the translation service aspect. Me? Samuel was caught off guard, surprised to hear his name mentioned. Yvonne has an incredible talent for design, and I believe she could greatly help in creating templates for posters. Me? Rachel went on to explain which colleagues' skills could help bring her project to life and how their strengths aligned with the proposal. She had clearly observed those around her, recognizing their strengths and seeing the good in people. And she had a clear vision of how to utilize those strengths to bring her ideas to life. She outlined her case, presenting it confidently within the limited time. That concludes our presentation. Thank you for your attention. As Rachel and I bowed, the applause we received was louder and more heartfelt than before. The room erupted with energy, and Rachel looked shocked by the reaction. I, on the other hand, had expected it, but I kept my thoughts to myself and simply told her, "Good job." After all the new employees finished their presentations, it was time for the competition among the existing staff. Theodore went first, presenting a proposal that, while a bit far-fetched, was profit-driven and typical of him. It wasn't bad. Under normal circumstances, his plan would likely have been chosen. However, during the final evaluations, the executives decided that they wanted to further refine Rachel's proposal. Rachel's expression was one of disbelief, while her peers congratulated her. It's rare for someone to achieve such a result in their first competition. The other employees would surely see her in a new light now. But just as the celebratory mood was settling in, Theodore shattered it. "This is ridiculous. How could a rookie's dumb proposal get approved?" Theodore stood up, raising his voice. Everyone froze, staring at him. The whole data failure was just staged. There's no way anyone could do those calculations that fast. It's all a sham. A fraud. It's absurd that these two idiots were chosen. He pointed directly at the executives, accusing them of making the wrong decision. And anyway, Travis here didn't even graduate from a regular high school, he's from an online high school. He's incompetent. There's no way someone like him could do those calculations instantly. Theodore's argument was nonsensical, but it was clear he was trying to discredit me in order to push his own agenda. I sighed, ready to respond and dismantle his baseless claims, but before I could, Rachel stood up. Travis isn't incompetent. In fact, he's the smartest, most capable person in this company. I was shocked. I never expected her to speak up for me like that. What? There's no way Travis is capable. You're just trying to defend someone who's been nice to you. Excuse me, but may I ask, Theodore, what's your IQ? My IQ? Have you ever had it measured? I haven't either. The average IQ of a Japanese person is around 112, but Travis's IQ is far above that. I've heard it's 200. I've seen the certification myself. 200. That's impossible. He's just making that up. Theodore. It was Kevin, our department head, who had remained silent until now, speaking in a calm voice. What Rachel said is true. I saw Travis's certification when I interviewed him. So, it's true. Yes, my IQ is indeed 200. From a young age, I was ahead of my peers in both language and math, a genius, they said. I was often called a prodigy, praised for my abilities. I was even reading English before starting elementary school, something that was unheard of for kids my age. Had I been raised abroad, I might have skipped grades and entered college early, but as a child, I found everything around me dull and uninspiring. School lessons were completely meaningless to me. I had already been studying high school level material on my own, and my classmates seemed immature, with nothing in common to talk about. I wanted someone to discuss recent economic trends, global affairs, or space engineering, things I was genuinely interested in. But all they cared about was playing tag or card games. Frankly, I was disgusted. Naturally, I didn't make any friends. If no one could reach my level, then being around them was pointless. With that mindset, I moved on to middle school. And there, too, I found myself isolated. I thought that by middle school, people would recognize my talent and try to keep up with me. But their level remained low, or so I believed. Until one day, I had a realization. Sure, I might be smarter than most. But emotionally, I was no more mature than they were. My attitude of looking down on others had pushed people away. Why would anyone want to be friends with someone like that? There was another boy in my class who was bright, not as much as me, but still one of the top students, and he was friendly with everyone. The problem wasn't them. It was my warped personality. Still, even after realizing that, I didn't feel the need to make friends. Being around people who couldn't engage with me on the same intellectual level only caused frustration. I grew tired of interacting with others and decided not to attend the prestigious private school I had been accepted to. School was bound to be boring no matter where I went. I eventually stopped leaving the house altogether, but my parents gently encouraged me, saying that at the very least, graduating from high school would be beneficial for my future. They were right, I couldn't continue living aimlessly. I could tell how worried they were, so I reluctantly enrolled in a nearby correspondence high school. At that school, many students worked during the day and attended classes at night. They were all working hard to earn money during the day. Some were saving up for their dreams. Others worked to support their families. Some had health issues that prevented them from attending regular schools. I met people from all walks of life, with different backgrounds and values. Surrounded by people like that, I came to realize that I was just someone who was smart. I couldn't do household chores, and I had no dreams. I had no one I wanted to cherish, and no special skills. I was just like everyone else. While I could do things they couldn't, there were many things they could do that I couldn't. My IQ score of 200, which I earned in middle school, was just one part of who I was. Finally, my thinking began to mature, and I started connecting with my classmates. I had worried about whether I could even hold a conversation with them, but the truth was, I was just a smart kid who lacked real-life experience. I was shocked when I realized I couldn't keep up with the conversations of people who actually had jobs. And it made me realize that I wasn't any different from everyone else, leading me to regret my past attitude. After high school, I joined this company, vowing never to boast about my IQ again. I submitted my IQ certification during the company interview as part of the qualifications, but there was no need to mention it to other employees. I'm just smart. Showing off wouldn't bring me any benefit. I didn't want to make the same mistake as in my school days, looking down on others and isolating myself. So, I limited how much I revealed of my abilities. Being merely smart, I never stood out at the company, and I was fine with that. But as I began mentoring Rachel, I slowly started to embrace my individuality again. Because she made an effort to understand my opinions and way of thinking, meeting me halfway. Even when I used my abilities, I knew there was someone by my side. That fact gave me confidence. During one of our casual conversations, Rachel found out about my IQ score, but she treated me no differently. You've mocked Travis over and over again, but the truth is, he's the most capable person here. Please stop making derogatory remarks about him. Rachel's face turned bright red from embarrassment after her bold statement. What did you say? A rookie like you, being so arrogant. And furthermore, Rachel interrupted Theodore's words. My presentation data. I'm certain the numbers were correct until yesterday. Travis checked them as well. So, I believe someone intentionally altered the data. And if I may be so bold, I think that someone was you, Theodore. The room buzzed with whispers. Theodore slammed his fist on the table, his anger evident. Do you even realize what you're saying? Trying to pin your mistake on me? I've never seen someone so foolish. I've seen you tampering with other people's materials multiple times. What? I was afraid to speak up before. I worried I might have been mistaken, and I didn't want to make things worse for myself. But this time, I'm the one affected, so I'm speaking out. Theodore's temples were bulging with anger, or so it seemed, until he suddenly began acting nervous and fidgety. Where's your proof? If you're lying, I'll sue you for defamation. Unfortunately, I don't have past evidence, but I believe the data was altered this morning. We can ask the IT department to check the usage and access logs, and they should confirm it. Kevin. Fire her immediately for such outrageous claims. She's a disgrace to this company. Theodore, sit down. Rachel, you too. Kevin's calm voice brought both of them to their seats. Theodore opened and closed his mouth like he had more to say, but no words came out. As for Rachel's accusation, we'll have IT verify it. However, it's a fact that Rachel's proposal outperformed yours, Theodore. The competition is over. Everyone, return to your work. With that decisive command, people began to gather their things and leave the conference room. Theodore remained seated, slumped over. Half a day later, the IT department reported their findings. As expected, there was a record of Theodore accessing Rachel's data. Additionally, there were traces of him accessing another presenter's data. Fortunately, the individuals noticed just before their presentation, so it didn't disrupt their work. With no way to deny his actions, Theodore was demoted to a regular employee but quickly chose to resign. He was also ordered to pay damages to the company. A former colleague who had been close to Theodore told me that he had been under immense pressure. Graduating from a prestigious university and becoming a manager at a young age had placed heavy expectations on him from family and friends. He had confided during a drinking session that the only way to survive in the company was to bring others down. In a way, Theodore reminded me of my younger self. I couldn't help but feel a bit of sympathy for him, hoping he would reflect on his actions and recover. On the other hand, Rachel's proposal was officially adopted by the company, and I was appointed as the project leader to bring it to life. Rachel's peers had fully accepted her by now, and I often saw her having lunch or drinks with them. Just as she had seen the strengths in others, now the people around her were starting to recognize her talents. About a year later, the new project was a resounding success. Rachel grew tremendously, becoming someone everyone around her had high expectations for. She took on new projects and delivered impressive results, eventually becoming known as the fastest rising employee among her peers. Though she humbly credited her success to the support of others, it was undoubtedly her own ability that led to her achievements. Even now, she graciously seeks my advice. She asked me how to navigate her role while also taking on management responsibilities. By then, I had already been promoted to department head, so she sought my advice. As I continued supporting Rachel, I gradually learned to fully utilize my own abilities at work. These days, I no longer look down on those who struggle. Instead, I delegate tasks I can't handle and ensure the company runs smoothly with a balanced approach. Those in leadership positions will naturally attract envy, but remember, they aren't your enemies. Try to understand others' perspectives and become someone who can meet them halfway. I'm working on that too, I told her, reflecting on my own life experiences. Recognizing others and accepting yourself. It sounds simple but is incredibly difficult to do. However, once you can do that, the collective energy of each individual can become a force that achieves far more than any one person could alone. I wish I could tell my younger self that I couldn't do everything alone. But it was because of those past mistakes that I've grown into who I am today. I believe that nothing in life is wasted. To make the rest of my life more meaningful, I want to live alongside others and find happiness together with them. That is my goal now. Matt. My mom is still inside. My best friend, on the verge of tears, pointed at the burning house and shouted. He had been my rock during the hardest times of my life. His mom was just as precious to me, a person I owed so much to. She was trapped in the flames, her life hanging by a thread. Matt? Hearing his desperate cry, I rushed into the collapsing building. Calling out her name, I blindly pushed through the intense flames and smoke. When I finally found her, I reassured her as we made our way to the front door together. It was just as we were almost outside. A burning beam collapsed onto my right leg. Watch out. My name is Matt Anderson. I'm 32 years old. In my life, there's something I deeply regret. Just one thing, no matter how much I regret it, I can never take it back. That is, hey, Matt. Starting tomorrow, you're banned from school lunch. You know why, right? Tell your mom to pay the lunch fees, will ya? This was back when I was in elementary school. My parents had divorced, and I was living with my mom in what they called a single-parent household. We were so poor that it was well known at school. I always wore dirty, ill-fitting clothes and carried a battered backpack my mom had found somewhere. There were many months when we couldn't pay for school lunches, and I was often teased by my classmates. Shut up. I don't need that disgusting lunch anyway. Of course, I was always hungry, and school lunch was the only time I could eat until I was full. But I pretended to be tough and fought with my classmates instead. Why was I the only one? Back then, I was constantly angry at everything around me. Looking back now, I realize I was in the middle of my rebellious phase. And all the frustration I couldn't release at school ended up directed at my mom. Matt. The school called again. You got into another fight? Please, give me a break. Shut up. I hated everything, the dirty clothes, the broken backpack, always being hungry, the small and dark apartment, and being mocked by everyone around me. When I was 10, I took out all my frustration on my mom after she got home from her part-time job. "I'm sorry." She didn't argue back. She just kept apologizing over and over, waiting for me to finish. It wasn't that she didn't have anything to say. She was simply too exhausted from working multiple part-time jobs to even muster the energy to respond. I realized that only after she was gone. That day, I had a huge fight with her in the morning. "I'll figure out the money, okay? Just ask them to give us a little more time." What? Why should I have to say that? The argument was over the payments for the 6th grade class trip. It wasn't much, just a few dollars each month. But even that was more than we could afford. The day before, my teacher had warned me that if we didn't pay soon, I wouldn't be able to go on the trip, and I was at my breaking point. Why was I the only one who had to feel this miserable? I wished I had been born into a family with just a little more money. No, I wished I hadn't been born to this mother in the first place. That's when it happened. I said the one thing I should never have said. "It's all your fault. I wish you'd just disappear, you worthless hag." Matt. I ignored my mother, who stood there in shock, and slung my backpack over my shoulder. Even as I walked out the door of our apartment, I didn't look back at her once. I finally said it, "Serves her right." Feeling a strange sense of relief, I headed to school in unusually high spirits. That day, no matter what my classmates said, it didn't bother me at all. But then, "Matt, pack up and get ready to go home right now, your mom." It was right before lunch break ended. My homeroom teacher burst into the library, panic written all over his face. That's when I found out my mother had been in a car accident. Oh, Matt. When I arrived at the hospital, a woman from the neighborhood came rushing over. She was Mrs. Emily Ross, whom my mom had been close enough with to list as an emergency contact. Her face was pale, and she gently placed a hand on my shoulder, telling me to stay calm. "Your mom is resting in that room over there. Let's go see her together, okay?" Ha! She wasn't feeling well and left her part-time job early. The driver said she crossed the street even though the light was red. Her words felt distant, like something happening in another world, completely unreal. In the morgue, my mother lay there, her entire body wrapped in bandages from head to toe. With the little skin I could see as white as a porcelain doll. No, this isn't my mom. Matt. I know it's hard to believe, but your mom is, she's gone. Emily's voice broke with tears as she hugged me tightly. Still, I couldn't accept it. I couldn't believe that the woman lying there was the same mother I had argued with just hours ago. The thought that I would never again fight with her or even speak to her was too much to bear. This is all my fault. Matt. It was all because I told her to disappear. Suddenly, the weight of reality crashed down on me, and I collapsed to the floor, unable to stand. I'm so sorry. Mom, I'm so sorry. From that moment, and for over 20 years now, I've lived with deep regret. And so, I've come to terms with the fact that I'll likely live for 30, 40 years, or perhaps even longer, carrying this regret with me every day. Because I'll never be able to apologize to her for the terrible things I said. And I know there will never come a day when I can be forgiven. After my mother's funeral, the remaining issue was what would happen to me. Ever since the divorce, my father had disappeared without a trace, and my parents had eloped to get married in the first place. Neither my father's nor my mother's relatives wanted to take me in, leading to heated arguments that dragged on for more than 6 months. If it ever comes to that, you're always welcome to stay with us. My son would be happy to have you. While everything was being sorted out, Emily took me in. Though we were complete strangers, she treated me like family, far more than my blood relatives ever did. And while my dad's not around, I'll be his stand-in. So, Matt, you can count on me too. Emily had a son the same age as me. His name was Jack. He was the only classmate who had ever stood by me at school. Big and strong, with a sense of justice so fierce he dreamed of becoming a police officer one day. But won't it be a burden with me here? I'll move out as soon as I can. What? You're smart, but man, you can be pretty dense sometimes, huh, Matt? Huh? Jack laughed and said, "It's not a burden at all. We want you here, that's why we invited you. Honestly, I was nervous being the only one at home, you know? But with two of us, I feel better. So help me protect my mom until I have a little brother or sister, okay, Matt?" Yes. At that time, Emily was pregnant. She was a career woman working at a large company and was on maternity leave. Her husband was away for work, and even though she was busy preparing for the baby's arrival, she still took care of me. Most of the preparations are already done, honestly. It's almost boring now. All that's left is to come up with a name for this little one. Hey, Matt, would you help me think of one? What? The baby's name. We're keeping the gender a surprise until the birth, so we need names for both a boy and a girl. But, come on, I've been thinking about it forever too. Let's do it together, Matt. Yeah, Jack's right. Can we count on you? Sure. Looking back, I realize now that this was Emily's way of helping me. She wanted to lift my spirits, knowing how withdrawn I had become. By giving me the important task of thinking of a name for her baby, she was trying to help me heal. Emily's warm, almost motherly kindness, along with Jack's straightforward, genuine friendship, gave me the strength to get through the hardest time of my life, right after losing my mom. If I could, I wanted to stay in this home forever. To live with Jack and Emily, just like this. I wanted that so much, I even forgot about what I had done to my own mother. I let myself believe that I could be happy again, and maybe that's why fate struck back so cruelly. Right before I moved up to 6th grade, I received a wound that would never heal. It was on my way home from school one evening. Okay. I think that's everything. Got everything Emily asked for. At the time, I was trying to help out around the house as much as I could. I felt guilty for staying with Jack's family for so long, as no one had come forward to take me in. At the same time, I was concerned about Emily, who was in her final month of pregnancy. That day, I had been sent to do some shopping, which is why I got home later than Jack. Huh? What's that? In the distance, I saw black smoke rising into the sky. The only thing in that direction was the neighborhood I was heading toward, where Jack's house was. No way, right? Ha ha. A bad feeling started to creep over me, and I instinctively quickened my pace. Suddenly, a fire truck sped past me, sirens blaring. What? My heart began to race, and cold sweat trickled down my back. There was a fire, and it might be near Jack's house. I had to go. The awful feeling grew stronger, and I clutched the grocery bag to my chest as I started to run. By the time I reached the neighborhood, out of breath, my worst fear had come true. Matt! From the crowd gathered around, Jack ran out toward me, his face pale and on the verge of tears. Thick black smoke filled the air. The overwhelming stench of burning wood and plastic filled my nose. As the firefighters yelled for everyone to stay back, Jack grabbed my shoulders and shook me. What do we do, Matt? What do we do? Calm down, Jack. Where's your mom? My mom. She's still in there. Jack's trembling hand pointed toward the house, Emily's house, now engulfed in bright red flames, with the second floor completely blackened. What? The fire started at the neighbor's house. She made me get out, but my mom is still in the kitchen. Covered in soot, Jack broke down, sobbing. He kept repeating, "She's still inside, Matt." What do we do? No way. Emily's still in there. It's my fault, Matt. What do I do? Ha! I said something horrible. I told my mom I didn't need her, or the baby. What? That morning, Jack and Emily had gotten into an argument. I didn't know exactly what they were fighting about, but Jack had stormed out of his room, skipping breakfast, and gone to school alone. Clearly upset. I didn't mean it, not at all, but I still said it. I get it. Jack and I were the same. We both let our anger get the best of us and said things we didn't really mean. The difference was, Jack still had a chance to apologize, to make things right. Help me. Amidst the crackling of the flames and the sound of collapsing beams, I could hear a faint scream, Emily's voice. Without thinking, my body moved on its own. Matt. Hey, you. Stop. Come back. I didn't hear Jack's voice or the firefighter yelling at me to stop. I ignored the heat from the flames and dove into the burning house. Emily. Where are you? Emily. I shouted her name as I pushed through the smoke and flames, making my way through the crumbling structure. When I finally reached the kitchen, I found her huddled in a corner, protecting her large belly. Emily, it's okay. I'm here. What? Matt? Why are you? Her eyes widened in shock when she saw me. From here, my memory becomes fuzzy. I vaguely remember running to her and telling her we needed to get out, but the next thing I knew, I was lying in a hospital bed, staring up at a white ceiling. Matt. Ha! Slowly turning my head, I saw Jack sitting beside me, his face a mess of tears and snot. You idiot! What were you thinking? Jack, are you mad at me? Of course I am. Jack shouted, pointing sharply at something. I followed his gaze and saw my right leg, wrapped completely in bandages. A burning beam fell and pinned your leg. You were trapped. What? I hadn't even realized I'd been injured until Jack pointed it out. Later, a doctor explained that I had suffered severe burns, even damaging the nerves in my leg. That's why I hadn't felt any pain. Seriously, I thought my heart was gonna stop, and it's all because of me. Oh, wait, what about Emily? Is she okay? Panicking, I scanned the room, but Emily wasn't there. Seeing my frantic search, Jack wiped away his tears with his fist and, for the first time, gave me a faint smile. Yeah, she inhaled a lot of smoke, but she's going to be fine. The baby, too. Thank God. I was more relieved by that news than by the fact that I was safe. I didn't want Jack, my best friend, to go through what I did. The thought of never being able to make up with someone you care about, like what happened with me and my mom, was unbearable. Jack, make sure you apologize to your mom, make things right. I will, thanks, Matt. Thank you for saving them. Just as Jack began crying again, I fell back into a deep sleep. When I woke up the next time, I found Emily and an unfamiliar man, probably in his 40s, sitting beside my bed. How are you feeling, Matt? I'm okay. It didn't take long for me to realize that the man was Emily's husband, Jack's father, who had rushed back from his work assignment. His tear-streaked face looked almost identical to Jack's. With his face twisted in emotion, he tightly gripped my hand. "Thank you so much for saving my wife and child, Matt. You're a hero to us." "Hey, you're going to scare him." "Calm down a bit," Emily said, gently scolding him with a soft smile. Then, her expression shifted to something more serious as she bowed her head deeply toward me. "Thank you, Matt. Thanks to you, me and my baby are both safe. I don't know how to repay you. We'll do everything we can for you." "Don't worry about anything," her husband added. "That's right, Matt. Just focus on getting better." "You don't need to worry about anything else," Emily reassured me. Okay. At the time, I didn't fully understand what they meant. But shortly after, a relative was finally found who agreed to take me in. I moved far away, to a place that required a plane ride, and from then on, I lost contact with Jack and his family. A few years later, when I entered high school, I became an outcast. Did you hear? Matt's skipping the sports day again. Yeah, he's been like that since middle school. Always with the "my leg hurts" excuse. He's just faking it, right? He even puts on a show, limping around like that. Some of my classmates mocked me, imitating the way I walked as they laughed. During moments like those, I always kept a straight face, silently walking out of the classroom, dragging my right leg awkwardly behind me. Because of the burns I suffered during the fire, I was left with a disability in my right leg. It wasn't severe enough to require a wheelchair, but the skin on my thigh and calf had tightened, leaving me unable to move it properly. Of course, I couldn't participate in any strenuous activities, so I always had to sit out during PE. My middle school and high school classmates would laugh at me behind my back, and sometimes even to my face. "Hey, Matt, I heard you've got a pretty gnarly scar on your leg. Mind showing me?" Sometimes, even students from other classes, who I'd never spoken to before, would approach me out of the blue like that. I didn't have anyone to stand up for me. And it was the same at the home of the relatives who took me in. "Matt, you'll be getting a job after high school, right? You're not seriously thinking of asking to go to college, are you? Finally, we'll be rid of the pathetic freeloader." I can't wait. Don't be so mean. But I did see his scar the other day. It's so gross, I can't even think about it without feeling sick. To them, I was nothing more than a burden, an orphan with a disability. They took care of me in the barest sense but hid me away like a shameful secret. I was pressured, in not so subtle ways, to leave once I graduated from high school. Yes, of course, I would say. I was as uncomfortable in that environment as they were with me. While my classmates were busy studying for college entrance exams, I was desperately searching for a job that didn't require a degree. That's when I found work as an employee at a hot spring inn. The fact that I could live and work there suited me perfectly, given that I would soon be out on my own. "Thank you for everything," I said as I left my relative's house on the day of my high school graduation. All I had with me were a few changes of clothes and my mother's small memorial tablet that I had kept by my side all these years. It was a quiet departure, with no one there to see me off. At the inn where I started working, I was treated much the same as before. Does he really need to limp like that? He's probably exaggerating. I bet he can walk just fine. Ugh, so embarrassing. Try to stay out of sight when the guests are around, okay? You're making us look bad. As long as your leg's the only problem, you should still be able to carry these, right? Gossip and blatant mockery were a daily occurrence. I was never allowed to serve customers and was stuck in the back of the inn, burdened with heaps of work as part of the constant harassment. It was all for one reason. I have a disability in my legs. Don't worry about it, they'll get bored eventually. Just hang in there. Even the manager, who had hired me saying all that mattered was my willingness to work, never bothered to step in and stop the others. There was no one on my side here either. Still, I kept working at the inn, not because I had nowhere else to go, but for another reason. Good night, Mom. See you tomorrow. Every night, as I finished my day, I would speak to the small memorial tablet in my room, picturing my mother's face. I wondered if she was angry at me in her final moments, or if she was in such a state of shock that she crossed the street while the light was red, without thinking. I had asked myself those same, unanswerable questions hundreds of times over the years. Time passed in a blur, and before I knew it, I was 32 years old. Welcome. My name is Matt, and I'll be showing you to your room. By now, I had become a senior employee at the inn. I was even trusted with serving guests directly, and the open ridicule had mostly disappeared. Occasionally, I would get a curious look from guests who didn't know my story. But I had come to accept that my right leg was simply part of who I was. Let's see, the next guest, huh? Their reservation changed from 2 people to just 1? Yeah, we got a call this morning. The guest seemed pretty upset. Upset? I raised an eyebrow at my junior coworker's comment. The reserved room was the most luxurious suite in the inn, offering the best view. Since it was the guest's first stay, I couldn't help but feel that it was probably meant for a special occasion, perhaps an anniversary. And now it seemed a bit of a waste with only one person staying. Maybe they had a fight or something? Who knows? Let's not pry too much into the guest's personal business. I warned my junior not to speculate too much and glanced back down at the reservation list. Even though I had just told them not to pry, I couldn't shake the strange feeling I had about this guest who would be staying alone in the special suite. The reason was Ms. Ross. That name held a significance I couldn't ignore. It instantly reminded me of my old best friend, Jack, and the woman who had helped me through the hardest time of my life, Emily. I wonder how Jack and his family are doing. When Ms. Ross arrived exactly on time for her reservation, the entire atmosphere of the inn changed. Every employee and guest present seemed taken aback. Hi, I have a reservation under the name Ross. I apologize for any inconvenience caused by the last-minute change in my reservation. No, not at all. I stammered, feeling unusually nervous as I greeted her. Because standing before me was a tall, stunning woman with a figure that could rival any model. Her porcelain-like skin was flawless, and her silky, glossy hair cascaded effortlessly over her shoulders. Her features were so impeccably beautiful that they went beyond beautiful, so she radiated an almost intimidating aura. Everyone around was left speechless by her beauty. Is there something on my face? Ha! No, I'm sorry. Get a grip, I mentally scolded myself. No matter how gorgeous a guest might be, it was unprofessional to get distracted. My job was to make sure they could relax and enjoy their stay. However, just as I began leading her down the hallway to her room, she suddenly stepped in front of me. So, I'll show you to your room. My name is Matt. Matt. Could I talk to you for a moment? Ha! Caught off guard, I was stunned as she moved in closer, suddenly gripping my hand tightly. Her beautiful face, the same one I had just been admiring, was now only inches away from mine. My heart began to race, and my face flushed with heat. Is something wrong? It's terrible. I was supposed to come on this trip with my mom, but this morning, out of nowhere, she said she was too busy with work and told me to go by myself. It's always the same, work, work, work. I see. Today is her birthday. I booked this special room to celebrate, but she chose work over her own daughter. Can you believe that? Well, we had this huge argument at 5:30 this morning. I told her I'm never celebrating her birthday again. Oh, I was completely overwhelmed by her energy and found myself unable to say anything more. Given my first impression of her, I had assumed she was cool and quiet, so her outburst left me at a loss for how to react. In all my years working here, I had never encountered a guest who was this open and friendly right from the start. Oh, I'm so sorry. I got carried away. My mom's always telling me I'm too familiar with people. No, it's not that. You're so kind, Matt. Thank you. Her slightly dejected expression made her look surprisingly innocent and cute. My heart skipped a beat, but then she said something that made it race even faster. Matt, have we met before? I feel like this isn't the first time I've seen you. What? Maybe if we spend more time together, I'll remember. Oh. Doesn't this offer a guided tour of the area? Could you show me around once I've settled in? Please, she asked, clasping her hands together and flashing me a warm smile. My heart started pounding again. For the first time since I started working here, I couldn't immediately respond with a professional certainly. Wow, this view is amazing. The view from your room is beautiful, but this spot is something special. It's a hidden gem. At first, I was still nervous, walking next to such a stunning woman, but as we toured the local sites, we started to warm up to each other. By the time we were halfway through, we were chatting easily. Ms. Ross, next I'll show you. Oh, you don't need to be so formal. I want us to be friends, Matt. Ah. I was beginning to understand that she was the type of person who said things that made your heart skip a beat without even realizing it. Okay then. You can call me Matilda, my first name. No, that's a bit. I couldn't possibly call a guest by their first name. Ha, you're so serious, Matt. And so kind. I appreciate that you're walking slowly, so I can enjoy the scenery at my own pace. Ha! It was only then that I realized I had made a mistake. When she asked for the guided tour, I should have explained that I walk slowly because of my leg injury. I should have also mentioned that if there were any emergencies, I wouldn't be able to move quickly. Normally, I only accept these requests if the guest understands those conditions. But today, I had forgotten to explain. I'm sorry. The truth is, I have a bad leg, so I can only walk slowly. What? Her eyes widened in surprise, and I quickly bowed my head. I couldn't believe I had let myself make a mistake at work just because I was flustered by such a beautiful guest. It was embarrassing. Please, don't bow your head. Are you okay? Is your injury serious? Ha! You hurt your leg, didn't you? And here I am, asking you to give me a tour. I'm so sorry. Now it was Matilda's turn to bow her head in a fluster. As she apologized, I instinctively bowed again, saying, No, it's fine. But then, she insisted with another apology, and soon we were both bowing to each other in the middle of the tourist spot. It's an injury from over 20 years ago. It doesn't hurt anymore, so my pace is just a bit slower, that's all. Really? I was sure you were showing us around while enduring the pain. But I'm so glad that's not the case. Seeing her cheeks flush, a small smile crept onto my face as well. She's such a beautiful and kind woman. And because of that, there was something I had to say to her. I know it might be presumptuous of me to say this to you as a customer, but with that preface, I looked straight into her eyes. Please don't say you'll never celebrate your mother's birthday again. What? She looked puzzled, so I explained. I told her that I had lost my mother just a few days before her birthday. I believed that day would always come. Even after a big argument, I thought we'd make up with just a simple happy birthday. It felt a bit awkward, but I was sure I'd say it again that year. But that day didn't come, and I realized then that nothing is guaranteed in life. Goodbyes come suddenly, without any warning. I'll never see the joy on her face when I wished her happy birthday again. Even though she was my only family, I couldn't have truly wished for her to disappear. And now, I can't take back those cruel words I said to her at the end. Because she's gone now. Please, don't have the same regrets I do. I'm begging you. She's a kind person, and if that moment comes, she'll regret it even more than I do. That's why, despite my position, I felt I had to tell her. I'm sorry for bringing up such a somber topic on your mother's birthday. Please, don't apologize. As she shook her head firmly, I couldn't help but think how kind she really was. Then, suddenly, she asked something unexpected. Matt, is there anything else you regret? For example, about your leg. She glanced nervously at my right leg as she asked. Why would she ask something like that? I was puzzled but shook my head firmly. No, I have no regrets about this leg. The burn left me with a permanent disability, and it caused me a lot of pain over the years. People's stares were always cold, and no one ever reached out to help. For a long time, I felt so alone. But not once have I thought that I shouldn't have jumped into those flames. This right leg is proof that I saved someone. Rather than regret, I actually. Could you tell me more about that? It was the first time anyone had asked me that. I hesitated for a moment, then nodded and said, of course. Then, I shared the story of how I got burned in the life I'd lived since. I felt so proud. I never quit working at the inn, no matter what people said, because I already had enough regret from what happened with my mother. I swore to her that I wouldn't give in to the words or harassment from others and live with more regret. I vowed to live in a way that I'd never regret anything again. So I only have one regret. That I never made up with my mother before saying goodbye forever. That's the one thing I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. That's why you should. Just as I was about to finish by asking her to reconcile with her mother, she cut me off. It's getting dark, isn't it? We should probably head back. With that, she abruptly turned and started walking quickly down the path we'd come from. Had I upset her by going on about myself? Feeling anxious, I hurried after her. But just as we reached the front of the inn, she suddenly stopped, her face turning red, and then she leaned in close to whisper in my ear. Please come to my room tonight. What? I'll be waiting. Before I could react, she dashed into the inn, leaving me standing there with my heart racing. That night, I was summoned to her special room once again. What awaited me there was. The word honey trap suddenly flashed through my mind the moment I stepped into the room. There she was, welcoming me with a smile as if she had been waiting for me. And a large man with a stern expression, sitting across the room. Excuse me, but who might you be? Are you Matt? The man's voice was low and intense as he glared at me with sharp eyes. Though we seemed about the same age, he had an imposing presence. Almost like someone who lived a very rough life. Yes. I see. As I stiffened with fear, the man leaned in closer, scrutinizing my face. I shot a desperate look at her for help, but then... Wait, what? Matilda! I was stunned. Matilda was crying. She wiped away the tears that streamed from the corners of her eyes with those long fingers. As if I had done something terrible to her. No. I didn't do anything. Didn't do anything? I mean, I didn't do anything. Wait, that's not what I meant. This was bad. It sounded like I was guilty of something. Or worse, like I had come here with some kind of intent. While I frantically shook my head, the man drew even closer. He was extending his arms toward me. I braced myself, thinking he was about to grab my collar, and squeezed my eyes shut. But just then, ugh! I heard a strange groan near my ear, and when I opened my eyes, the man in front of me was crying. What? It really is you. Matt. I finally found you. The man placed a hand on my shoulder, crying as he called me Matt. There was something oddly familiar about the way he said my name. Are you Jack? The name slipped from my lips naturally. Yes. It's me, Jack Ross. Hey Matilda, I finally found him. His face lit up, and he turned to Matilda with a bright smile. Matilda wiped her tears and nodded enthusiastically. Yeah. I'm so happy too. I'm so glad for you, Jack. What? In stunned silence, I watched as Jack, my long-lost friend, and Matilda shared a smile. If Jack was Matilda's brother, then... Wait a second. Yes, she is, Matt. Without wiping away the tears that welled up again, Jack nodded repeatedly. Matilda was the child who had been in Emily's womb 22 years ago. After the fire, she was born at the hospital and grew up to be the adult standing before me now. My name is Matilda Ross. You must be the Matt who saved my mother and me. With tears in her eyes, Matilda gently took my hand. I could hardly believe what I was seeing. My childhood friend, whom I had been separated for 22 years, was now crying with the same scrunched-up face as back then. The child who wasn't even born yet at the time had grown into a full-grown woman, calling my name. When I heard about you, I thought, could it be? The story was exactly the same as the one I had heard from my mother and brother countless times. A 10-year-old boy kept encouraging my mother, who was frozen with fear in the middle of the blazing fire. He helped her to the front door, supporting her the whole way. But just as they were about to get out, a burning beam fell on the boy's leg. What made her think it was me was the part about losing my mother just days before her birthday. And when she heard about me suffering severe burns on my right leg while saving a pregnant woman, she was certain. That's why she rushed back to the room and called Jack here. She told me they had finally found the person they had been searching for all these years. You've been searching for me all this time. Yes, ever since you moved away, my mom kept trying to get updates. But all we ever heard from relatives was that Matt is doing well. Eventually, they stopped picking up our calls. When I graduated from high school, my mom went to visit in person. But you had already left by then. When she asked where you went, no one knew. So, for over 10 years, we kept looking for you. I can't believe it was by chance that Matilda found you. Jack chuckled bitterly. It was so unbelievable, I couldn't help but stare. And seeing that it was really me standing there, they were overwhelmed with emotion. Why would you go to such lengths to find me? Of course we would. You saved my mom and Matilda's lives. You're a hero to our family. No amount of thanks could ever be enough. And if you ever need anything, we'll help in any way we can." Then, Jack hesitated for a moment. He glanced at my right leg. "When you walked in, I noticed you were limping a bit. Is it still not moving properly?" "Well, it's much better now, thanks to your family." I had learned about this through conversations with relatives after entering middle school. The reason I was suddenly taken in was because of Emily and her husband. They had offered to cover my living expenses, school fees, and even the cost of my burn treatments. While I didn't have everything, they raised me until I graduated high school without any major hardships. I was also able to receive enough medical treatment at the hospital. So if you're talking about returning favors, I'd say I've already received more than enough. Thank you, truly. I expressed my gratitude to Jack, as well as to Emily and her husband, who weren't here. Even from afar, they had cared for me. I can't express how much that saved me from the loneliness I felt. I've always wanted to meet again and say thank you. But with work and everything, so much time passed. But you were left with a disability, huh? Jack muttered bitterly, looking down. I gave his shoulder a reassuring pat, telling him not to worry. This was the result of my own choice, to act without regret. So, I didn't regret it at all. By the way, did you make up with Emily, Jack? Yeah, right after that. Just like you said, I apologized right away, and I'm glad I did. Mom and Jack are still really close. Meanwhile, I'm always getting scolded. That's because you never listen to Mom, isn't it? Jack playfully knocked on Matilda's head with his fist. Their exchange lightened the mood, and Jack finally seemed to relax a little. With a softer expression, he suddenly brought something up. "Hey, Matt. If you're up for it, how about working with me?" "Huh? Actually, right now." Matilda suddenly interrupted Jack mid-sentence. What she said left me completely stunned. "My brother is the president now." "What?" "Hey, Matilda. That was the important part. Sorry." Though Matilda apologized, she couldn't hide her bright smile. It was as if she couldn't help but feel proud of her brother for being the company president. "Well, she beat me to it, but yeah, I'm running a company now. I was put in charge of one of the subsidiaries under my dad's group." "Wait, your dad runs a group of companies?" Jack explained to my astonished self. Not long after Matilda was born, their father, who had been an elite at a major company, became independent. His company grew rapidly, and now it's a group with dozens of companies under it. Jack, who had been training under his father, was finally appointed president of one of the subsidiaries about 2 years ago. Apparently, their mom is even busier, serving as both the vice president and the president's secretary. A lot has happened over the 22 years since you left, Matt. Both good things, and of course, bad things. Bad things? Yeah. As soon as he became president, all kinds of people started cozying up to him. There were high-ranking executives blatantly trying to wrest control away from the inexperienced president. Then there were women who, dazzled by his title, tried to become his girlfriend. And clients who hadn't paid him any attention before suddenly started flattering him nonstop. It became exhausting, trying to figure out who was being sincere and who was lying. Jack sighed as he explained how it had worn him down. "That's why I want to work with people I can trust completely. That's one of the reasons I've been looking for you, Matt." "Me?" Jack nodded emphatically at my confused reaction. Then, he extended his hand to me. Next to him, Matilda was smiling brightly. I need you, Matt. You're the person I trust more than anyone. But I only graduated high school. I'm not sure I could be of any help to you. I started working for my dad right after high school too. My dad always says he trusts employees with more hands-on experience over those with higher degrees. And that approach is what helped the company grow. So, it all comes down to how hard you're willing to work, doesn't it? But, how do you know you can trust me? Seeing me trail off and look down, Jack lowered his hand. Then he chuckled, saying, "You're such an idiot. You've already proven it, haven't you? What? You saved two people who mean the world to me. Without even thinking about your own safety. How could I trust anyone else over you?" He extended his large hand toward me again. Take pride in yourself, Matt. You're my best friend, and I couldn't be prouder of you now and always. Jack. He, too, had been thinking about me all this time we'd been apart. I realized then that with people like him caring for me, I was never truly alone. The joy of that was overwhelming. As I reached out to grasp Jack's hand, I couldn't hold back the tears that blurred my vision. Thank you, Jack. I'm so happy we met again. So happy. Me too. Thank you so much, Matt. With tears streaming down both of our faces, we shook hands firmly. Watching us, Matilda wiped her eyes, smiling all the while. For the three of us, this night would become an unforgettable memory. Afterward, I left the inn. And soon after, I started working at Jack's company. Under a surprisingly tough boss, I'm now throwing myself into learning the ropes. Most of the company was against the idea of me becoming Jack's right-hand man. But those voices just fuel my determination. I'll prove them wrong with results, I declared with resolve. Jack smiled and gave me a thumbs up. That's why you're the man I trust most in the world. By the way, Matilda wants to invite you to dinner. Are you free tonight? Ha! Just as I stood there, confused, someone burst into the president's office. Jack! Why'd you tell him? You were pacing outside the office forever. Consider this payback from last time. Ugh! Matilda, who was lightly hitting Jack with her fists, had turned bright red up to her ears. When she stopped, she awkwardly turned to face me. As a thank you for 22 years ago, how about tonight? Sure. I'd love to. Really? The moment I agreed, her face lit up like the sun. Her emotions shifted so quickly, it was adorable. My heart suddenly skipped a beat, and Jack nudged me playfully with a grin. She's a handful, but take care of my sister, okay? Ha! I would come to understand the meaning behind those words later. With Jack, my reliable friend and president, always by my side, and Matilda, who was energetic and cheerful, working as a secretary in training, my days became more fulfilling than ever. Amid the busy days, I visited my mother's grave for the first time in 22 years. Beside me stood Emily, who had finally reunited with me, her hands clasped in prayer. Thank you so much, Matt. She whispered, eyes closed. I just thanked your mother too. I told her that because she gave birth to such a wonderful son, my daughter and I were able to survive. During her life, your mother did so much for me. Emily smiled as she looked up, explaining that she had expressed her gratitude once again. Did my mother ever say anything about me? I asked hesitantly. I wasn't exactly a son to be proud of when my mother was alive. She worked herself to the bone for me, yet I was always rebellious. I braced myself, expecting to hear complaints. Sensing my apprehension, Emily gently placed her hand on my back. She always said you were incredibly smart and truly kind at heart. What? Your mother was always proud of you, Matt. She never said a single bad thing about you. As she softly rubbed my back, Emily smiled warmly. In that moment, tears started to flow uncontrollably down my face. Really? Yes. Until the very end, your mother was proud of you and loved you deeply. I know that feeling, as if it were my own. That's why when I named my daughter, I thought of you. I wanted her to grow up to be just like you. As I listened to her kind words, I couldn't stop the tears. It felt as though my mother was there, telling me it was okay, and my heart felt lighter. From now on, I'll carry the memory of my mother with me. Even if she has forgiven me, the regret I hold will never fade. But something has clearly changed in me. I'm no longer bound by that regret. I've learned to live with it and move forward. That regret is what drives me to cherish the people around me now. It feels like my mother's final gift to me. Instead of saying, I'm sorry, I want to say, thank you to my mother in heaven from now on. I believe she's watching over me with a smile and with pride. Don't make me spell out why you got demoted. Just look in the mirror, it's obvious, right? With a laugh, my boss traced his finger over his face. He was clearly referring to the large scar on mine. Even with this face, I thought I had worked hard. I had delivered results, too. But in the end, the reason for my demotion was not be able to trust someone with a face like that in sales. However, the beautiful woman I met after the demotion cried when she saw my scar. Finally, I've found you. Meeting her would go on to change my life in ways I couldn't have imagined. Hey, Bear. Did you cut your bangs a bit? Looks great. Why don't you go show that off to our best clients? Haha, got it. I packed the catalogs in my bag and started getting ready, feeling a bit nervous but excited. My name is Robert Beringer. I'm a sales rep at an industrial machine manufacturing company. When I first joined, I wasn't sure I could handle sales, but recently, I've been getting the hang of it. I've even gotten better at making eye contact when talking with clients. The reason it took me so long to get comfortable in sales, and the reason my senior complimented my haircut, are both the same. It's because of my face. I have a large scar from an injury in the past. It runs from between my eyebrows, across the space between my eyes, and down to the side of my nose, like a line drawn across my face. Back in school, I could brush it off, but once I entered the workforce, it became a real obstacle. When I was assigned to the sales department, I grew out my bangs to try and cover it up. But I couldn't grow them long enough to hide everything. What helped me move past it were my understanding senior and, most importantly, our loyal clients. Many people appreciated how clearly I could explain the machines. It gave me courage and confidence. A lot of them even suggested I cut my hair, so I figured they'd be happy to see it. Feeling proud, I was about to head out for my rounds. But then I heard a voice behind me. Like a monster trying to befriend humans, huh? I turned around and saw my supervisor, in an expensive suit, his hair slicked back. Robert, you've had your hair cut, huh? What a waste. If you'd grown it longer, you might have been able to cover that scar. Not that anyone would see your face then. The one running his hand through his hair, as if to mock me, was my supervisor, Mark. Mark was the head of my sales team, and he'd been like this toward me ever since I started. Normally, someone in higher position would have stepped in to stop him. But Mark's father was on the company board and related to one of our biggest clients. In other words, nobody dared to interfere with him. Mark, I just wanted a fresh cut. Excuse me, did you see that face? Man, what are we gonna do if we lose clients cause of him? Ignoring his snide remark, I left the office. When I first started, his comments used to get to me. But not anymore. I was confident that I could now face the world with my head held high. Or so I thought. But a few days later, I was suddenly called into the conference room and handed a transfer notice. No, it wasn't just a transfer. Being reassigned to a desk job far from our newly established headquarters was essentially a demotion. Why? I may have been slow to start, but I'm finally delivering results. Why this? In the room were the department head, Michael, and Mark. Michael just sat with his arms crossed, staring at the corner of the table. This was when I was about to plead my case further. Mark crossed his legs, turned to face me, and with a smirk, said, "Don't make me spell out why you got demoted. Just look in the mirror, it's obvious, right?" As he said this, Mark traced his finger over his face, laughing. He was clearly referring to the large scar on mine. Even with this face, I thought I had worked hard. I had delivered results, too. But in the end, the reason for my demotion was we can't trust someone with a face like that in sales. And so, I was transferred to a branch far from the headquarters. On my first day at the new branch, I was feeling nervous for the first time in a while. Maybe it wasn't just nerves, I was still dwelling on the day I learned about the demotion. Regretfully, I walked through the industrial area, away from the city center, thinking about why I had my haircut in the first place. "Excuse me. My name is Robert Beringer, and I'll be working here starting today." Although this was a small, remote branch, the building was brand new and clean. I knocked on the door and called out. Soon, an older man with a kind demeanor approached. "Sorry to keep you waiting. You're Robert, right?" "I'm Kevin, the branch manager here." "Nice to meet you." "Ah, yes. We've got one more person here, but she's out running an errand." "Robert, are you feeling okay? Was the trip too far? You're looking down, do you need to take a break?" "No. I'm fine, really." When I finally managed to look up, I saw that Kevin's face was full of genuine concern for me. Relieved by my response, he led me to my desk. As we walked, he kept up the conversation, and I quickly realized he was a kind person. But I couldn't help wondering what could I do in a branch with only 3 people, including myself. Just as I was looking up at the ceiling, feeling lost, Kevin suddenly exclaimed, "Whoa! Robert, that scar, was that from an injury?" Kevin, seeing the scar on my face for the first time, reacted with exaggerated surprise. In an instant, memories from the past flooded back. On my first day in the sales department, everyone avoided mentioning the scar, as if walking on eggshells. Only Mark had reacted like Kevin just did. It seemed all the resilience I'd built up against judgments on my appearance had melted away. I was left speechless, and Kevin, realizing his mistake, was about to say something to recover. But just then, the office door flew open. "I'm back. Who knew buying a duct tape would take so long?" "Oh." The woman who walked in, carrying a bag from the hardware store, had a short bob haircut. Her natural makeup only highlighted how beautiful she was. I couldn't help but wonder why someone like her would be working in such a remote place. Without realizing it, I had been staring straight at her. She was looking at me, too. "Oh, Catherine. This is Robert, our new team member starting today." In a hurry to break the frozen atmosphere, Kevin quickly introduced me. Snapping out of it, I quickly lowered my head and introduced myself. I'm Robert. I'll be Bear, right? Ha! I've heard all about you. The work here might be different from what you're used to, but let's do our best together. Once again, I found myself looking up, but Catherine was smiling at me warmly. Was she not seeing my scar? Yet somehow, as if I had forgotten all about the scar myself, I was smiling back at her. So, what's the tape for? Oh, this? The photocopier's acting up, and since the repair guy's far away, I thought I'd try to fix it with this. Ah, I see. Wait, what? I have some documents I need to print, but the copier isn't working. Kevin tried hitting it, but not only did it not fix it, now it's cracked. With a sigh, I headed over to the photocopier. Sure enough, the display showed an error, and the paper tray had a noticeable crack. It was clearly a network issue, but these two genuinely seemed to think they could fix it with duct tape. As I scratched my head in frustration, Catherine peeked over my shoulder. Bear, are you good with this kind of stuff? Yeah, kind of. Despite feeling increasingly unsure about working here, I knew I had to deal with this situation first, so I turned to Catherine. I was so caught up in my anxiety that I hadn't noticed how close Catherine's face had gotten, almost touching the tip of my nose. No wonder I had noticed that pleasant scent. I quickly turned my face away and opened the photocopier, explaining step by step to Catherine. Catherine, can you call the service provider and request a replacement for this part? I'll handle the error in the meantime. Kevin, I'll need to use this computer. Wait, you can fix it, Robert. I brushed off Kevin's exaggerated surprise and booted up the computer. This branch was supposed to be less than 6 months old, but everything felt completely unorganized. I connected the photocopier to the network and tried printing a test page. As soon as the machine made startup sounds, the two of them erupted into applause. Amazing, Bear. You can fix computers and machines too. Well, I used to be in sales. And we also handle photocopiers, so I know a thing or two. Just please don't hit it when it starts acting up again. Both Catherine and Kevin nodded enthusiastically, clearly impressed by the repair. Watching them reminded me of a similar situation with a customer during a maintenance visit. They were desperate and so grateful when I helped them. Come to think of it, that was when I started to feel more confident about working in sales with this face. I found myself remembering that moment, but now that I had been demoted, it no longer mattered. There's no sales work here at all. It's mainly helping other offices, handling deliveries, and doing final order checks. That's probably why I was sent to a place like this, far from the city. While Catherine had been out buying tape, Kevin had given me a brief introduction. Kevin was originally at another branch, but he was promoted to become the manager of this one. He jokingly called it a promotion in name only. What surprised me even more was Catherine. It was shocking enough when I heard about her background, but seeing her in person made it even more so. She was the president's daughter. Apparently, she had requested to work out here in this remote branch. Both of my superiors were a bit of a mystery, but I wasn't ready to get too involved just yet. The next day, I was upgrading my computer, Catherine was preparing direct mailings, and Kevin was drinking tea. Suddenly, the intercom buzzed. Catherine started to get up, but as the lowest ranking person, I quickly handled it. Hello, how can I help you? Sorry to bother you all of a sudden. I'm from the factory next door. Excuse me. Just a moment, please. I checked with Kevin. He said we had introduced ourselves to them when the branch first opened. but they weren't a client, and this was the first time they'd visited. I got his permission and went outside. A man, still in his work clothes, looked like he had rushed out in a panic. "I'm Robert. How can I help you? I know this is out of line, but please, we need help. One of our machines suddenly broke down, and the repair guy can't come today. If we miss this deadline, we're done. Could you please take a look? We'll pay you, of course. For a factory, missing a deadline can be catastrophic. But we usually don't accept requests from non-clients. The times I'd fixed other things were purely because I wanted to help. There were, of course, employees who would have simply refused. But what's the point of having a branch out here, in the middle of nowhere with no clients, if we don't help when someone asks? I couldn't just leave this man, who looked like he was about to get on his knees and beg. "I'll step out for a bit." "What?" "Robert." I rushed over to the factory. Inside, a group of people, looking lost and anxious, stood around helplessly. I was led to the malfunctioning machine and quickly got an explanation of the situation. It wasn't one of our machines, but since the issue didn't involve any proprietary technology, I was able to get it running again in under 30 minutes. That should do it. It's a more complex error, so make sure to have your technician check it out later. Oh, thank goodness. Thank you so much. Now we can make the deadline. I'll come by to properly thank you later. Don't worry about that for now. Just focus on your work. Take care. As I left the factory, receiving their repeated thanks, I couldn't help but sigh. I was already rushing into things on just my second day after the transfer. Bear. "Catherine, why are you here?" I rushed over after finishing up. "I'm so glad you fixed the machine. You're amazing." She grabbed my dirt-covered hand and, with a bright smile, looked me in the eye. "Don't worry about the company rules, I'll handle that. I'm just so glad you were here. Kevin and I wouldn't have been able to help." As Catherine pulled me along, I couldn't help but laugh, remembering the whole photocopier incident. When we got back to the office, Kevin thanked me for my hard work. I spent the rest of the day deep in thought. This area is full of old factories. The factory I just visited didn't have outdated equipment, but their machines were vulnerable to accidents. They're essentially being left behind by technology. We got away with helping this time, but if anything else happens, we won't be able to offer assistance. That's just how the company operates. Even though I knew that in my head, my eyes and hands were glued to my computer. The next morning, I woke up at my desk. The smell of coffee greeted me as Catherine approached. "Oh, did I wake you up? Good morning. Here, coffee and a sandwich for you." "Wait. What? Oh, did I stay the night? I'm sorry, let me pay you back. Don't worry about it, I made them." "Ha, you said you were going to stay late, but I had a feeling you'd pull an all-nighter. So I came in early, and I was right." "What were you working on?" I felt a little flustered by the fact that Catherine had gone out of her way to make me a sandwich, but I calmly explained. "Let me say up front, this is more of a hobby idea. Yesterday, after going to the factory, I started thinking. It's just for this area, but what about a troubleshooting network service? Like a help service? Pretty much. In this area, regular maintenance intervals tend to be long. What if we offered to handle that? Deadlines are critical for factories. We could monitor the machine data online, and if something looks off, we could check it before a problem occurs. As a business model, maybe a monthly subscription. We'd either partner with the original service providers or. I laughed while explaining this hypothetical idea, eating the sandwich she made. It was so good I was about to thank her when. Wait, Bear, you can actually make that? Ha! Well, I stayed up all night trying to figure it out, and I did end up pulling an all-nighter. You made it. Catherine looked at me in shock, her eyes serious. I felt a bit uneasy that she was listening so intently to something I had just casually come up with. Well, it's not ready to go to market, but I managed to make a prototype. I have a bunch of IT certifications, so want to take a look at the program? All it needs now is to input the machine data. Bear. Yes. Let's do this. Ha! While I was confused, Catherine's smile shone even brighter than usual. Just 5 minutes before the start of the day, right after Kevin arrived at the office, the intercom buzzed again. It was the person from the factory yesterday. Catherine led him into a makeshift meeting room partitioned off from the main area. Probably about yesterday. I've already prepared the invoice, so it saves us the trouble of delivering it. He's an honest man, Kevin remarked. Impressed. While Kevin seemed pleased, something about the earlier conversation between Catherine and the factory worker didn't sit right with me. If it was just about handing over an invoice, it should have been quick. Kevin seemed to be wondering, too, as the conversation was taking longer than expected. Just then, Catherine called for me. Carrying the tea I had prepared, I made my way to the meeting room. For some reason, the atmosphere was serious. When I made eye contact with Catherine, she pointed at me and said something completely unexpected. Robert, who handled the work yesterday, will fully back this project. So, what do you think? Since we've established a connection, would you be willing to participate in the trial run of our troubleshooting service? Robert and I will come by again soon to explain everything in detail. Oh, it was him. He worked so quickly and knows his way around tech. We've been putting off solving issues like this for a while now. All right. I'll trust you with it. Thank you very much. While still holding the tea I hadn't managed to serve, I watched as the two shook hands firmly. Caught up in the flow, I bowed in thanks and saw the man out. What is going on here, Catherine? Robert, Kevin. We're about to start something new. I quickly glanced at Kevin. He was stroking his chin, deep in thought. Robert, could you explain this in simpler terms for me as well? Catherine, it looks like it's really happening. Yes. Thanks to Bear, we're going to make this project a success. I was completely left in the dark. There were so many things I wanted to ask, but I couldn't find the words. For now, I was told to refine the software before our follow-up meeting in 3 days. Setting an appointment to introduce a new system, this was full-on sales work. Writing the program was fine, but the thought of having to do sales again made me hesitate. What if my scarred face ruined everything again? The memories of my past struggles began to flood my mind. Without saying anything, I went back to my desk and started coding. I figured that if I finished the materials, either Catherine or Kevin could handle the presentation. I kept typing away at the computer, even after they had left for the day. I wasn't doing it for them, I was driven by the sole purpose of making the program perfect so I wouldn't have to go to the sales meeting myself. Finally, I looked up from the computer and stretched my neck toward the ceiling. That's when I heard a noise coming from the meeting room. It was already past 9 p.m. Holding my breath, I quietly peeked through the gap in the partition. What? There, lying across a few chairs, was Catherine. It looked like she had slid off the desk she had been resting on. Her tight skirt had ridden up, her legs were spread out, and her blouse had shifted up as well, exposing more than she probably intended. She seemed to be asleep. But perhaps because the blouse was uncomfortable, she unconsciously began to unbutton it from the top. Ah! Panicking, I rushed over to carefully prop her up, making sure her clothes didn't get more disheveled. Catherine! Yawn. Oh, Bear. I thought you had gone home. Hee hee, I may be your boss, but I've got your back. Here, I brought some late-night snacks. With a smile, Catherine pulled out a bento box and a thermos of soup. We ended up having dinner right there. The colorful, hearty bento was absolutely delicious, and the warm soup seeped into my body, revitalizing me. I couldn't help but notice her blouse was still slightly open, so I kept my gaze down, avoiding it. As I slowly sipped my soup, Catherine started to speak softly. Sorry for pushing things forward without asking. I just felt like with you, Bear, we could really make it happen. But I must have put you in a tough spot, didn't I? No, I wouldn't say that. I glanced at her, but she didn't look convinced. Unable to withstand her gaze any longer, I brought up what had been on my mind. Catherine, you said you'd heard about me before. What exactly did you hear? Yeah. She set her mug down and continued. It wasn't good stuff. I believe it was your old supervisor, Mark. He went out of his way to contact me. And I decided not to believe him. What? No one but me can truly know Bear. So I just ignored what he said. And, turns out you're exactly the person I thought you'd be. Catherine looked at me with a gentle, soft smile, not just a regular grin. Flustered, I blurted out. What do you mean by that? Let me guess, Mark told you about my scar, didn't he? He did. But to me, Bear is Bear, scar and all. It didn't really register. Was that insensitive? The very scar that had tormented me, the one that I had agonized over since joining the company. She looked at it straight on and said it didn't matter to her. Ha ha. What's so funny? No, you're just different, Catherine. I'm not different at all. For some reason, her words quickly lifted me out of the spiral of my past, making me feel optimistic again. 3 days later, Catherine and I visited the factory. I had finished the prototype program, and I was able to give a simple demonstration during our explanation. What surprised me was Catherine's rapport with the factory workers. I hadn't known, but she had been regularly visiting the surrounding factories. In fact, she was already well acquainted with most of them. Her genuine personality was widely known and respected in the area. Thanks to that, the factory agreed to help with the trial run of the program. For the first time, I was able to look them in the eye and sincerely thank them. As we were about to leave, the factory manager hesitated before speaking. Robert, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but what is it? That scar on your face. Does it bother you? When you helped us before, you barely made eye contact. I figured it was because I put too much pressure on you. He seemed hesitant to bring it up, but he spoke honestly. I felt that I should also respond with the same honesty. To be honest, when I first came here, I was worried about how people would perceive me. But I've changed. I can't work with someone and not look them in the eye, especially if we're going to be working together. Ha ha. Looks like you've come to terms with something. Seems my advice wasn't needed after all. Ha? When I reacted in surprise, he rolled up the leg of his work pants. A thick, straight surgery scar ran down his calf. In this line of work, even small mistakes can lead to something serious like this. You're young, and I'm sure you've been through harder times than I have. But despite that, you've helped us out and found ways to make our work easier. I trust you completely. His smile was so genuine, it almost brought me to tears. Standing beside me, Catherine smiled and playfully bumped her shoulder against mine. I'll give it my all. I bowed deeply and returned to the office. As I walked back in, I noticed Kevin pacing around. Oh, you're back. How did it go? Everything work out? Yes, I secured the trial cooperation agreement. I'll do my best. That's great. Good, good. Kevin seemed a bit off, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. Just as I was about to rush back to my desk, I felt a strong tug on my back. Kevin. Robert. I've been meaning to apologize. Kevin, looking uncomfortable, lowered his gaze and fidgeted with his arms as he began to speak. I've been thinking about it for a while. I owe you an apology. On your first day, I said something insensitive about the scar on your face. I reacted based on the information I'd heard beforehand, and I'm really sorry. You're such an honest and hard-working person, and I misjudged you. It's fine. Your reaction was normal. I'm okay with it now. Let's keep working together, Kevin. Thank you. Bear. Ha? Wait, that name. Let's keep going strong, Bear. With Catherine suddenly jumping into the conversation, I was officially dubbed Bear at the branch. I had been called that by close friends before, so in a way, I felt like I was finally settling in with the team. After work that day, Catherine and I decided to have a small celebration. Kevin couldn't join us since it was his child's birthday, so we planned to celebrate with him another day. I thought about suggesting that we wait until all three of us could get together, but that was just an excuse. In truth, I was grateful for the chance to have dinner alone with Catherine. She took me to a nearby food stall bar within walking distance. It had plenty of tables and chairs, and it seemed to be a popular spot for people working in the area to relax and unwind. Hey, boss. Two of the usual, please. To my surprise, Catherine seemed to be a regular. She greeted the people who were already there with a friendly familiarity, exchanging casual hellos with them. Catherine, do you come here often? I didn't expect that. This place is really delicious. Plus, you can hear all sorts of interesting stories from people around here. I see. We toasted and celebrated the beginning of our new project. The project's going to rely a lot on you, Bear, but I'll be there to fully support you. Let me know if you need anything. Well, I might have to ask for more of your sandwiches then. Got it. No, I was joking. I laughed, but when I looked forward, Catherine was resting her chin in her hands, her cheeks slightly flushed, probably from the alcohol. She was gazing at me intently. Then, wrapping one arm around her shoulder, she lowered her eyes and asked, Bear, can I scoot a little closer? Sure. It's getting crowded, right? The place wasn't really that packed, but I needed some excuse to keep my heart from racing. Catherine placed her glass on the table and moved her chair right next to mine. The chairs were now touching each other. Even in a place like this, her familiar pleasant scent still teased my senses. I suddenly found myself at a loss for words and kept sipping my beer to calm my nerves. Before I knew it, Catherine had pressed her shoulder against mine. Our bare arms touched, her warm skin sticking slightly to mine. At the same time, I could feel her chest softly pressing against me. When I glanced at her, Catherine's face, with her half-closed eyes, seemed to radiate a different kind of allure than usual. I figured she must be tipsy and decided to treat her accordingly. I had to, or else the quickening pace of my heartbeat would have been too much to handle. But the words Catherine whispered in my ear snapped me back to reality. "Bear. Can I touch your scar?" Catherine. Without waiting for my response, she reached out with her another hand and gently traced the scar from my forehead. I froze, unable to react. Her soft fingers moved slowly, starting from my forehead, gliding down between my eyebrows, alongside my nose, and finally brushing lightly against the corner of my lips, before tracing the edge of my lower lip. "Please stop." I finally found my voice and rejected her touch. Catherine withdrew her hand and repositioned herself, putting some distance between us. "Sorry, but I've finally found you." Before I could grasp what she meant, Catherine lunged forward and hugged me tightly, almost falling off her chair. I didn't understand what was happening, but I knew she wasn't acting out of drunkenness. I stayed still, letting her embrace me until she decided to pull away. I had no idea how much time had passed, but by the time I came to my senses, Catherine had already paid the bill. We began walking slowly toward her apartment, still silent. Then, suddenly, she muttered under her breath. That day, it was a bit brighter since it was in the evening. That day? When I asked, she turned to face me and began speaking with her usual smile. The high school I attended, it was known as a prestigious girls' school. You could tell just by the uniform. I was warned when I first enrolled to be careful, but I didn't really take it seriously. One evening after supplemental classes, while waiting for my ride, I decided to wander around the area. I was so naive. A man approached me, and I thought he seemed kind. Before I knew it, I was surrounded by a group of men on a dimly lit street. Catherine let out a deep sigh and looked up at the night sky. I didn't know the area, and there was no one around. I was so scared I couldn't even scream, just stood there trembling with my eyes squeezed shut. Then, I heard a small chime, followed by a loud thud. I opened my eyes, and one of the men surrounding me had been knocked down, lying on his back, with a boy standing over him. I stopped walking, looking at Catherine in shock. She turned to meet my gaze. He threw them one by one, but then one of them pulled a knife and came toward me. I couldn't move out of fear, but the boy shielded me and threw him aside. When I finally managed to breathe, I tried to thank him, but his face and feet were covered in blood. After finishing her story, Catherine fell silent, hugging her bag tightly. It was as if she was lost in the memory of that day. "You're hurt. What should I do? A handkerchief won't be enough. I'm gonna get chewed out for this." "Hey, can I have this handkerchief?" Sure, but you need to get to a hospital." "Nah, it's fine. It's nothing serious. I'll handle the police. You just get going. That uniform of yours, you're from that rich school, right? Hurry up, get out of here." Catherine held her bag tighter, then grasped my hand and looked straight into my eyes. I couldn't tell my parents what happened or even figure out how to find him. The only clue I had was the small bear charm he had attached to his backpack. And I'd been carrying the guilt of never properly thanking him all this time. "Catherine, thank you for saving me." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she smiled as she spoke. When I heard that someone named Beringer with a large scar had joined the company, I couldn't believe it. but when I saw your face, I knew immediately. It hurt to think that this scar was because of me. But I also admired how you had earned so much trust in sales despite everything. I guess that was selfish of me, though. Not at all. Ha! I only really struggled with my scar when I got removed from sales. And the person who helped me move forward again was you. I quietly pulled a small pouch from my bag and showed her what was inside. No way. Catherine stared in disbelief at the handkerchief from that day. I never forgot either. I always carried this with me, hoping that someday I'd be able to return it to you. Even though I thought we came from different worlds. I gently took her hand and placed the handkerchief in it. I'm just glad you're okay. Catherine clasped the handkerchief tightly in her hand, tears streaming down her face. I, too, felt a sense of closure from this unexpected reunion. I hadn't expected anything more. But just as if to defy the thought, Catherine wiped her tears and leaned in close to me. I've always had something important I wanted to tell him when I met him again. Her face moved closer, making it harder for me to form any words. What is it? I fell in love at first sight. Will you go out with me? Her confession, whispered from such a close distance that I could feel her breath, erased the promise I had made to myself not to hope for more. I had kept that handkerchief all these years because I could never forget her. I opened my eyes and stared at her face, now so close that we could almost touch. I'd been in love with you since that day, too. Catherine smiled, and before I could fully process it, an overwhelming sensation rushed through my body, and I found myself hugging her tightly. Hey, Bear. Good job. That nickname's still embarrassing. I'm here to give an update on the app's progress. A week had passed since that night, since Catherine and I started dating. I had been handling the interactions with the factory on my own now. Even though it's already helpful, you're telling me it'll get even better? That's amazing. It's thanks to your cooperation in the trial run. When I first got demoted and sent out here, I never imagined my life would turn out like this. Now, I felt happier and more fulfilled than ever. But suddenly, a familiar obstacle appeared in my path. As I returned to the office and opened the door, I heard an unwelcome voice. This is more of a warehouse than a branch. Or maybe a cage? It must be tough for you both. Having to take in someone like him after his demotion. Mark? Oh, long time no see. Out here in the sticks, you don't have to worry about that face of yours, do you? And you even cut your hair. Well, I guess this place suits a monster like you. As Mark spoke, Catherine stood up, but Kevin gently held her back. It was a familiar scene for me, something I'd dealt with before. I kept my cool and responded. Are you here on a sales call? Ha! As if I'd come to a dump like this for work. I'm here to say hello. Ha! Mark then pulled out a designer gift bag and handed it to Catherine. We haven't had much time to talk, but it's such an honor to be engaged to the daughter of the company president, Catherine. Don't you think? Wait, engaged. I haven't heard anything about that. Oh, didn't Mr. Yates tell you? Well, maybe it's something they'll discuss after you return to headquarters. So, what's your preference for the honeymoon? Overseas, perhaps? I've already been to most places, but a domestic trip might be nice for a change. Catherine's face turned pale. It was clear this engagement had been arranged without her consent. I kept my composure and faced Mark. By the way, Mark, did you drive here? Ha, of course. You think I'd come out here without a car? There's no parking around here, so I had to walk a bit. It's the worst. Feigning surprise, I exaggerated my reaction. Oh no! This area is really strict about parking violations. I wonder if your foreign car is okay. What? Why didn't you say something sooner? You're as irritating as ever. My dad's going to kill me. Caught up in our playful banter, Mark ran off in a panic, forgetting to say goodbye. Of course, he made sure to take the gift he'd brought with him. It was just like him. Catherine, are you okay? Yes, thank you, Bear. And Kevin too. I've dealt with Mark before. But, this engagement thing, I'll talk to my father about it. The rest of the day passed uneventfully. That evening, I walked Catherine home. As we said goodbye, she spoke seriously. I will never accept that engagement, Bear. I promise you that. Yeah. I trust Catherine completely. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Mark wouldn't just leave things as they were. The next day, Catherine was summoned to the headquarters. I was still uneasy, but all I could manage to say was, "Be careful." In the evening, I received a message from Catherine. "It's over, and I'm heading back now," she said. I was relieved to hear that she was coming back safely, though the matter of the engagement still weighed on my mind. I planned to wait for her. By the time night had fully set in, the streets outside the city center were getting darker, and foot traffic had thinned. Catherine was walking along one of those dimly lit streets, carrying several paper bags in both hands. Probably souvenirs for our office and the factory workers. The street was dark but close to the parking area. Catherine was walking quickly, trying to get through the area. That's when it happened. A group of masked men blocked her path, and when she turned around, she realized she was already surrounded. She tried to escape, but the narrow street left her cornered against the wall. One of the men pulled out a knife, flashing it threateningly in her direction. "Get off her!" My voice roared through the darkness. "Bear! Stay where you are! You hear me?" I charged at the men, throwing them aside one by one. It seemed they were foreigners. The last man, the one with the knife, turned toward me and braced himself. I looked at him, still laughing, and taunted. "What do you think you're gonna do with that knife? Can you even see my face? Do I look like someone who's scared of a knife like that?" The man hesitated for a moment but then lunged at me. His movements were clumsy and unpracticed, and I quickly knocked the knife from his hand and threw him to the ground. "Honestly. Catherine, are you hurt? Bear! What are you doing here?" I helped her up as she collapsed from relief and explained. "Kevin. He had a bad feeling and told me to check on you." Kevin did. I think he had a hunch about something. As I spoke, I pulled off the mask of the man with the knife. My suspicions were confirmed. As I thought, this guy was the only one who wasn't a foreigner. He reacted when I spoke. "Catherine, call the police." After everything was taken care of, we returned to the office. Unlike before, Catherine's main concern was the souvenirs she had bought. "Weren't you scared?" "Of course I was. Until you showed up, Bear." Seeing her smile shyly made me even more determined to protect her from any future threats. But the next problem wasn't aimed at her, it was aimed at me. Just 2 days later, it happened. I was suddenly summoned to the headquarters. The call came from the HR department. Catherine looked pale, and Kevin let out a groan. It was Kevin who broke the silence. "We might have been set up." "What do you mean?" There's no reason for Bear to be called in like this. Catherine was in a panic, but Kevin calmly tried to reassure her and then turned to me. Bear, just go. As your boss, I'll have Catherine go with you. The two of you can handle this. With that, Kevin handed me the keys to the company car. It was the first time I had been to the headquarters since that fateful day. I was led into a large conference room, where some familiar faces and the bosses I'd only ever seen in photos were seated. Catherine glared intensely at Mr. Yates. The meeting was led by the head of HR, Edward. I had to stand and listen as they laid out their accusations. Apparently, I had been loitering around the headquarters out of resentment for my demotion, and in a drunken rage, I had attacked an innocent person, sending them to the hospital. The events of that night had been grossly distorted by the time they reached HR. Just as Edward asked me if the claims were true, Mark interrupted. Do we even need to hear his side of the story? We have eyewitness testimony from one of our employees who happened to be there. Isn't that enough? It's true, the evidence speaks for itself. There are photos, aren't there? Robert, surrounded by ambulances and police cars. And the employee's testimony. That should be enough, said Oliver, Mark's father and a company director, backing up his son. It was clear that father and son were teaming up to attack me. Edward, under the weight of their authority, seemed ready to side with them. I fought to assert my right to defend myself, and eventually, I was given a chance to speak. I took a deep breath and began carefully. Yes, that's me in the photos. The room murmured, and Mark and Oliver nodded smugly. I continued scanning the room. That night, I did indeed throw several men. The photo shows me explaining the situation to the paramedics and police that I called. More like an interrogation, Mark jeered. Ignoring him, I pressed on. Did this eyewitness take any video of the incident? Of course not. We don't employ anyone with such poor judgment as to film at a crime scene, Oliver scoffed. I see. I reached into my bag and pulled out something. It was my personal phone. Without saying a word, I began to operate it. As soon as the audio played, the atmosphere in the conference room froze. Who hired you to go after Catherine? There must have been someone behind this. I don't know. We were just gathered online, probably with fake account names. What was the account name? I paused the recording. It was the conversation I had recorded after subduing the man with the knife. This is a recording of the person I'm accused of attacking. And I did some investigating on my own. The real name behind that account is Mark. What? All eyes turned to Mark. But he wasn't going down without a fight. He quickly seized on a weakness in my evidence. So what? That doesn't prove anything. Audio can be faked, and you could have paid anyone to say that. I expected him to latch onto that argument and put my phone away. Although I didn't want to drag her into this, Catherine tugged at my sleeve, her determination clear. She stood up, looking ready to take charge. Edward, may I speak from here on? Yes, do you have something decisive to share? Robert didn't want to involve me, but the truth is, that night, I was surrounded by masked men. One of them had a knife. There was a loud thud as someone suddenly shifted in their seat. It was Mr. Yates. Catherine must not have told them about the incident. Just as Mr. Yates looked like he was about to speak, Catherine shot him a fierce glare. Robert happened to be there by chance, and he saved me. The recording you heard earlier was from the interrogation of the only suspect who could understand English. And here is the evidence to back it up. Catherine held up a tablet. Displayed on the screen was a video of Catherine being surrounded, followed by me throwing the attackers to the ground. "Why is there a video?" Mark suddenly shouted out in frustration. Oliver's face twisted as if he had just swallowed something bitter. This video was recorded by one of the attacker's friends. Apparently, he had been consulted about this job and, out of curiosity, came to see what was happening. When he saw Robert's judo moves, he was so amazed that he decided to film it. After Robert spoke with the police, the friend approached me and gave me the video. Now, with this video and the audio recording I provided, don't you see the truth behind this incident? Mark. With everyone's eyes on him, Mark slowly stood up. It was clear that his eyes were unfocused. So what? I got rid of an eyesore, and I was going to get the girl I wanted. What's wrong with that? I'm an elite, I can make anything disappear. Isn't that right, Dad? Mark. You fool. I worked so hard to cover this up and get you that engagement. Why do you always have to get rid of anyone you don't like? Oliver looked around, realizing too late that he had spoken out of turn. Mr. Yates. My son is just upset right now, he didn't mean. Oliver, are you saying your outburst was also due to your distress? Ugh. Mr. Yates glanced over at Edward and spoke. It's clear now. The consequences for Mark and Oliver will be determined later. I understand, Edward replied. Mr. Yates then turned to me and Catherine. I'm sorry to ask this of you both, but could you come to my office next? Yes. I wondered what more could be waiting for us, as a wave of exhaustion washed over me. Together with Catherine, I followed him to the president's office. The secretary had already prepared tea for us. Please, have a seat. Thank you. Catherine still glared at Mr. Yates. With a deep sigh, he slumped his shoulders and spoke. Catherine, can you please stop being so upset? I've already apologized about the engagement. And I'm sorry for getting Robert involved. I'll make sure to deal with Oliver and Mark appropriately. I trust you, Dad, Catherine said, turning her head away in defiance. Mr. Yates, flustered, looked every bit like a father who couldn't handle his daughter. I couldn't help but chuckle. Oh, sorry about that. No, it's fine. Robert, can you tell me more about yourself? I'm ashamed to admit that I only know what's written on your file and what I've heard from Mark. I hesitated for a moment, but then I caught Catherine's encouraging smile. I decided to speak. My family was a single-parent household. My father practiced judo as a hobby, so I trained at a dojo throughout my school years. My mother says my strong sense of justice comes from my father. I was expected to have a promising future in judo. But one day, on my way back from the dojo, I intervened in a fight involving a drunk man, and I injured my leg. I continued judo, but I could no longer make quick movements. Still, I couldn't stand by and let others get hurt, so I kept stepping in. Seeing Catherine's face darken, I shook my head and smiled at her. I don't regret my leg injury or this scar on my face. But it meant I could no longer pursue a career in judo. And I had a lot of uncertainty about my future. That's when my teacher at school, a great person, suggested I try programming, since I had a knack for science. It was tough at first, but I studied day and night, even collaborating with students from abroad. I decided this was the path I'd take. But when I entered the workforce, I ended up in sales. I won't lie, I felt like all my hard work had gone to waste. but I had confidence that no matter how much my environment changed, I could overcome it. I paused, took a deep breath, and looked directly at Mr. Yates. The transfer was my first real setback. But Catherine was the one who helped me recover. Her constant smiles and encouragement gave me the strength to keep going. She's someone very special to me. Without realizing it, I had blurted out something extra, and I kept my gaze fixed on Mr. Yates. He simply said, "Thank you," and with that, we were dismissed from the headquarters. The next day at work, I couldn't help but notice Catherine and Kevin smiling knowingly at each other. I was still tired from the day before but tried to carry on as usual. Then the intercom buzzed, and I went to answer it. When I saw who the visitor was, I rushed to the door in disbelief. "Sorry for interrupting your work, Mr. President." The unexpected visit from Mr. Yates made me even more nervous than I had been yesterday. But, strangely, I was the only one feeling that way. Both Catherine and Kevin were acting as if it was business as usual. "Oh, Kevin. Sorry I couldn't come by sooner. Turns out you were right all along. Mr. Yates, it's all in the past now. Come on, have a seat," Kevin said, motioning for me to sit down as well. Still stunned by the situation in front of me, Mr. Yates began explaining. "You see, Kevin and I are what you'd call colleagues from the same class. Before I inherited the company, I was just an employee like everyone else. Oliver was, too." His logical approach left little room for doubt. "Kevin, does this mean you had me go check on Catherine because—" "Yeah." I knew Oliver's nature, and his son was just the same. I figured it was better to be safe than sorry. I never imagined Kevin, who I had seen as a passive type, was so perceptive. I mentally apologized to him for underestimating him. And today, I came here because I have something to discuss with you, Robert. "Me?" "Yes, first, about Oliver and his son. We've asked them to resign. Oliver called me a fool for being a doting parent, but this decision wasn't just because of Catherine. I intend to protect all my employees." "Mr. Yates." He nodded and then took on a more solemn expression. "And as for what you told me yesterday, that man you saved while injuring your leg, that was me." "What?" "I wasn't sure at first. I couldn't see your face clearly back then. But I remember the bear-shaped charm on your bag. I had no way of finding you. But yesterday, after hearing Catherine's story, I realized it. Both my daughter and I owe you our lives. There are no words to express my gratitude. Thank you." Overwhelmed by the truths being revealed, I could only bow my head in silence. Mr. Yates left quickly, saying he'd invite us to his home soon. I couldn't help but think, as busy as he is, he came all the way here just to share the truth. That's exactly the kind of person Catherine's father is. That evening, I stayed late to finish some final tasks, and Catherine brought me a light meal. We took a break together. Seriously, so much has happened these past few days. "Yeah, but you were amazing, Bear," Catherine said, smiling. "Please, stop with that. I'm not amazing. But, hey, in anime and comics, aren't there a lot of heroes with scars on their faces?" Yeah. I love that character from a ninja with a scar, and samurai stories too. Right? I liked those characters, too. When I first got this scar, I kind of felt like I'd become a hero myself. I was proud of it. But when I realized fantasy and reality are very different, it was a little disappointing. I thought I was just reminiscing, but when I noticed Catherine had gone quiet, I quickly tried to correct myself. I don't mean I'm ashamed of it. I know, but Bear, you just don't understand. Ha? Catherine looked at me with a mix of sadness and frustration. You don't realize just how much of a hero you are. To me, to my dad, to the people at headquarters, to everyone at the factory, and to Kevin. You're everyone's hero. You're the hero I've been waiting for all along. A hero. I see. It was as if a fog had lifted from my mind. And looking at Catherine, who had supported me through it all, nearly in tears, I had something I wanted to say in return. In that case, Catherine, you've always been my hero, too. I moved behind her and gently wrapped my arms around her from behind. She grabbed my hands and buried her face in my arms. Then make me your heroine instead. Ha ha. Hey. 2 weeks later, I was running the final tests on the prototype at the factory. We intentionally triggered errors to see if the system would respond correctly. Bear. The system is picking up even this small discrepancy. Does that mean it's good to go? Yes. Everyone at the factory clapped and cheered with excitement. We were finally moving toward the full commercialization of the project. In fact, as the prototype neared completion, thanks to Catherine and Kevin's efforts in reaching out to other factories, we had already gained a number of new clients. Thinking about the future filled me with excitement. As for Oliver and Mark, they ultimately chose to resign. In such a small industry, rumors spread quickly. Finding new jobs would likely be very difficult for them. Mark, in particular, had relied solely on his father's influence, so his actual sales skills were almost non-existent. What happened to them after that, I didn't know. To be honest, I just hoped they were grateful it didn't escalate into something criminal. While I was back at the office, taking a short break, Catherine and Kevin returned. Great job, Bear. Judging by that look, everything went perfectly. We also secured a follow-up meeting for later. Yeah, everyone's excited. They said their work has gotten much easier, and they can't wait for the full product launch. Feeling happy, I decided to bring up something that had been bothering me since I arrived. Can I ask, what exactly is this branch? Honestly, I thought I'd been demoted when I was sent here. But there's no reason to build a branch in the middle of nowhere with no customers. And we've got the company president's daughter and his old colleague here. On top of that, our project got the green light from the company. It's been puzzling me for a while now. I clenched my fists and waited for their response. Catherine and Kevin exchanged glances, and Kevin spoke first. Well, we were planning to tell you eventually. This branch is actually part of the first phase of a major company reform. What? To put it in comic terms, this is like the starting village, Kevin said with a grin. He continued. Mr. Yates is pushing for a new reform for the company, but he didn't have the right ideas or the right people to make it happen. So, he decided to build this branch in an isolated area, hoping we'd find a new direction. The people chosen for this mission were Catherine, who will eventually lead the company, me, a trusted colleague, and you, someone with both IT knowledge and sales potential, though unproven. And you've delivered results. So that's why you were connecting with factories that weren't even clients. We were just having fun with it. With a smile, the two of them returned to their work. My heart was still racing. A hero, huh? Whoa, Catherine. I hadn't noticed that it was already past 5 p.m., and Kevin had already gone home. Apparently, I'd spent quite a bit of time lost in thought. Hey, it's just the two of us now, Catherine teased. Yeah, I guess so. My dad says you should come to our place this weekend. By the way, did you ever tell Mr. Yates that we're dating? I didn't tell him. But I've been telling him how much I like you since the day I met you, Bear. Maybe he figured it out because I stopped saying it recently. As Catherine laughed, I couldn't help but ask, why did you stop saying it? She sat down beside me, linking her arm through mine, and looked up at me with those familiar eyes. She whispered, because. I can tell you directly now. Without thinking, I wrapped my arms around her and pulled her into a tight embrace. Can you call me Robert instead of Bear from now on? Robert. I let my hands gently touch her cheek and then traced along the corner of her smile. Please, stay by my side forever. Looking back on my life, I've taken some detours, but none of it was in vain. I can say it proudly now. The saying, hard work never betrays you, is true. But only those who have worked hard will ever truly understand that.